They're in the Home Office being paid for by us.
I know.
To do this stuff. This is where Trump is just great, you know, just doing that stuff. No, I don't want to pay any of these people anymore. You are not only all useless, you are sucking the life out of this country.
I know. Totally.
But
Anyway,
we've got some talk about growth coming up.
We've got some growth coming, apparently.
No, we've got talk about growth.
Yeah, the only thing that's growing is the population and, of course, the inflation index, which is also growing, and everything's getting more expensive. I can tell you that because I spent an awful lot of money yesterday having lunch. Well, it's supposed to be cheap.
Stroke dinner.
Yeah, stroke dinner, stroke after dinner drinks.
Are you still there
cigars.
now?
I think so. I'm not sure how I managed to get up this morning. Anyway, never mind. It's a morning.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public is not being told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And a very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I was not at that lunch/dinner with Mike. I'm feeling very hurt, but there we are. He survived a breakfast show. That's the important thing. I've been there, Mike. I feel your pain. Anyway, you've got me now. We are, of course, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is fabulous to have your company. Another busy day. Any moment now. Oh, I'm so excited. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is going to be starting a speech in which she's going to unveil plans for growth. Yay, we're going to get growth because it's the #1 priority of the government. Oh, that and net zero. Oh, gosh, that's a bit of a problem, isn't there? Because those are mutually exclusive things. Pick a side, Keir Starmer. Pick a side, Rachel Reeves. I wonder which side they pick. Well, it appears today, they say they're picking the side of growth, but it's not in contravention of net zero. I mean, they're completely lying. However, we're told we're going to get plans to create Europe's Silicon Valley. We are going to have the Oxford-Cambridge corridor. More homes, greater travel links, more help for the south. Don't you worry your pretty little heads in the Midlands and the North. no one cares about you. Just in case you were wondering, even when we do build a high-speed rail line, eventually, maybe by, 2050, it will mostly be concentrated on southern links to a bit of the north. You know how these things work. It's always been this way, has it not? We're also going to expect a raft of policies to grow the region that could add, we're told, £78 billion to the UK economy by 2035. Do you believe a word of it? I'd love to hear your thoughts, because the Chancellor also, we are told, we expect, will confront Cabinet opposition, i.e. Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, to the expansion of Heathrow, Gatwick and Luton airports. Pretty much go ahead for Gatwick and Luton expansion already on the cards. But Heathrow's third runway, it's been in contention basically as long as I've been alive. This has been going on. We've got a warning that growth will not come without a fight. But who is she going to fight? Because it seems to me she's fighting an awful lot of businesses who are desperately trying to grow but can't afford to, because they can't afford the new minimum wage and national insurance increases and all the other costs that we've got right now. High energy costs, a small but rather crucial matter, in fact, a huge matter. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Will what Rachel Reeves announced today, and we will, of course, not take the speech live. You know why? Because we like you too much and we'd like you to not switch off. But we will, of course, bring you any new detail, any confirmation on Heathrow, any confirmation of what is actually going to happen with this Silicon Valley in Oxford, Cambridge. Then we will actually bring that to you first. But I want to know, will this deliver growth? Tell us why it will. Tell us why, let's be honest, it won't. I would love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk, then your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at talkTV. You can also, of course, send us a message on our YouTube page. That is free. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. We're also going to be talking about a new poll which shows that a majority of British people want to bring back the death penalty. The strongest support is among millennials, so younger folk. The polling was carried out following the sentencing of Southport killer Axel Rudakabana last week. Got 52 years minimum sentence. But of course, he was 17 when he carried out those awful murders and attempted murders, so he wouldn't have been eligible for capital punishment anyway, even if it were the law. It would only be for adults. Plus, we're going to talk about the NHS. Yes, yet again. This time, a damning report by MPs warning that the NHS is run by bureaucrats who lack ideas and are obstructing the reforms needed to fix it, as I've been saying for quite some time. Anyway, that is what is coming up. Plenty more besides, including, in particular, Donald Trump's attempt to freeze the federal budget. That's been blocked by a judge, but also his offer to millions of federal employees. Take 8 months redundancy and basically sod off so we don't have to pay for you anymore. Is that what we should do here in Whitehall? Great idea if you ask me. Anyway, we're going to talk about all of that, plenty more besides, as I say, and I'm delighted to say joining me in the studio today, it's been a long time since you've been here, writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth. A very, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
I mean, I'm assuming you've had yet another child since I've last seen you.
Yeah, I've had about 10.
Most weeks, to be fair. Most weeks. There's another one popping out.
I am a fertility.
You know, we're going to talk a little bit later about your population crisis, you know, and we have to keep importing another 5 million immigrants every few years because we have no one's having babies. Candice is doing her bit. Yep. What are you doing, people?
Yes, exactly.
I only did one. I have underproduced. I started too late. But Candice is doing more than your fair share.
Yeah, there's no birth.
We salute you.
Oh, well, thank
we salute you.
I'd like that.
We need. You know what we really like in this country? Lovely, happy people getting married. Lovely other happy people who both work, who are producing lovely, happy children in a happy family environment. Maybe. God, this is a mind-blowing idea. Maybe we should try and support that as a nation and government policy and tax policy. And maybe we should try and make it easier for people to have the families they want to have. Wouldn't that be a mind-blowing idea?
Yeah, and it's not rocket science. Where I live, it's a new development. It's affordable for young families. Everyone moved in. Guess what? Everyone was expecting a baby. Yeah. The two go together. It's simple. It really is simple.
Absolutely. We'll talk more about that later on, I'm sure. I think that's going to be one of the biggest issues in the next few years. I really, really do. Anyway, let's get to work and talk about Rachel Reeves. She's just started speaking. You can just pretend you're in the room. She's in Oxfordshire. You can pretend you're in the room, so I have to do this. Economic growth is my #1 mission. I mean, it was like being there, wasn't it? It really was like being there. Yes. Do you believe them? I mean, they're saying a lot of good stuff. There's a load of work. They're talking about dynamism and growth and speed and you know, and all this, you know, and action. And there's lots of they've basically gone through the thesaurus and gone for lots of action words.
Yes,
you know, they're very excited.
Yes.
Do you believe any of this that they're announcing? Well, not 100% sure about everything, but what we've heard, do you think any of this is going to deliver growth?
I think, well, it can deliver growth, but maybe not in the short term, maybe in the medium to long term, because a lot of the things that they're focusing on are more infrastructure and the sort of things that government can control. Absolutely, like reforming planning laws.
I'm all in favour of them doing that. Or you wouldn't have your new build otherwise, would you?
Exactly. You know, building reservoirs so we don't hit a water crisis and stuff.
No new reservoirs since 1992.
Yes.
But like 10 million more people. I mean,
well, exactly.
Do the math.
It's insane. It's like people haven't thought 18 months ahead even. So all of that stuff, great, but that's going to take time. What is the immediate inhibitor to growth is her budget, particularly the employer's national insurance.
Yeah.
That is a huge...
25 billion quid that cost employers? What a surprise.
And they're in denial about it. But I mean, their minds have to be focused.
The headline today from the Mail is, you know, basically businesses pleading, you want growth, you're saying we have to help the growth, and they're saying tear down the barriers to growth that you created.
Yes. It's because they see the state as the way to grow the economy. They think they have to pull the levers. That's actually what they say. They talk about the lever for growth.
Yeah. Well, Rachel Reeves, I mean, you know, she even met with I thought this was mind blowing in such a good way. Met with regulators like Ofcom and Ofgem and Competitions Commission. And she met with the bosses of those organisations, which have nothing whatsoever to do with growth and competitiveness and delivery. They're about regulation. I mean, I'm all in favour of regulation where it keeps us safe and protects us from, you know, monopolies and things like that. But that's nothing to do with growth. And she met with those people to help get with ideas about growth. Talk to people who've created multi-million, billion-pound companies.
Well, exactly. But
talk to people who create small businesses and employ 6 people.
Yes.
But 6 people who wouldn't otherwise have a job. They might know more about it.
But they know nothing about that. I really do believe that Labour has become dominated by people who've never worked in private business. Totally. You know, someone I know who's actually quite left-wing even said it shocked him that a lot of people who he knows from the Labour movement haven't even run a cafe. You know, it's just stuff like that. Simple things like never had to make payroll.
I've always said these people would not get through episode 1 of The Apprentice.
Yes.
Episode 1. I mean, it's just starting again now, but that's the thing. There is no evidence. I mean, even the new trade envoy to some part of the world, I can't remember where. Again, has literally no experience whatsoever in terms of. Here we go. This is. A Labour MP. Gosh, I can't remember her name, but she did once threaten to smash a journalist's face in with a bat when he asked her about her son's drug dealing convictions. Yeah, but she's our new trade envoy to somewhere, goodness knows where. But she again no experience whatsoever. I mean, literally nothing. So, you know, she worked in a supermarket at age of 16. Brilliant, well done. Lots of kids do. But after that, there's no evidence of any knowledge or experience of business. I mean, these people are, you know, non-entities, a lot of them. That's the thing. There is an argument about, like, the Silicon Valley thing, this idea that we've got this amazing, innovative sort of brain power in Oxford and Cambridge in particular. We've got a huge number of startups in tech, in AI and things like that, in pharmaceuticals and things in those areas. Weirdly, Oxford and Cambridge are bizarrely hard to get between the two. You kind of have to go into London and come back out again. You're looking at a 2.5 hour journey where it's really not that far. Getting better transport there, that seems to make sense between important possibly potentially economic hubs. But we know the basic problem is that we get ideas here, we come up with brilliant ideas and invent things, and then you sell them to the Americans or you move to America to go and make money doing it. Now, isn't that kind of the problem, which is that actually people can't really run a successful business the same way? It's about a flexible labour market, which they want to make less flexible. It's about cheap energy, which we're never going to have under this government. And really basic things like that, and a market that just says, what can we do to help you?
Yes. Well, also, what grew Silicon Valley as well was a visionary investment culture. So, I mean, you had these VCs who came in, basically, and were willing to invest in these high-risk businesses. And a lot of people I speak to in the tech sector say sometimes that is a bit lacking here. You know, your business gets to a certain point, and then you can't get any more investment. So, I mean, DeepMind, that, you know, just absolutely groundbreaking AI company that was founded here, they had to go to America to get the funding to sort of reach the next level. So, I mean, we need that sort of thing. And, you know, incentivize it through tax breaks. I mean, just do anything you can to get that going. The government can do so much, And then you just have to leave it over to people who've got the grit and the brain power. And anyone who knows anyone who starts a business knows that that is one of the hardest things you will ever do. You want to make it as easy as possible.
I can remember my husband starting his IT business. I mean, we just, got together. I mean, when we had a young baby, and he would come home. He was working a 70, 80-hour week, and he would come home to sort of, read a story to her before, she's 6 months old, and put her in the bottom. He was, great dad, and help put her to bed. And then he'd be back on the computer. I mean, I don't think we saw each other for more than like, an hour a day. I mean, or a week sometimes, because it took every waking hour. The risk that you had to take, you get paid for the first year. And I don't think many people in the Labour Party really understand that, and I don't think they really admire it and respect it, because I am in awe of anyone. And people say, like, just running a corner shop, I'm in awe of anyone who sets up their own business. I am in awe, because it's such a brave, risky thing to do. You have to rely on yourself, and you have to, and I know so many of our audience, people like, that's one reason, during lockdown, they were the people being hit the hardest, but they are the wealth providers. I'm not someone who's like, the public sector's useless, the private sector is king. The public sector, we need people to have, okay, we can argue about how we perform healthcare, but we need healthcare. We need good education. We need roads. We need lighting. There's a lot of stuff the public sector needs to do, but there is so much fat on the bones of the public sector that is basically leeching off the wealth created in the private sector. You can't pay people in the public sector to do this job. You want to pay teachers and doctors more, you need to have a stronger wealth creating private sector. It's just that simple.
Of course, and I know so many people who are sort of like, what am I working for? I am being taxed so much, like half my income just goes. I can barely afford to live. And that's such a problem, because people are incentivized by that. That's what keeps people moving. It gets them taking on more work. It gets them to start a business. That's very basic.
And also, if you can, I don't know, mad idea, you can help hand it on to your kids.
Well, of course, all
the urge that people have to actually hand their wealth on to their children. That's a really strong part.
Of course.
By the way, the trade representative I was just talking about was Kate Osmore. She's a Labour MP for Edmonton and Winchmore. She's the UK's new appointee trade representative to East Africa. She's a member of the Socialist Campaign Group, Parliamentary Caucus. Of course, she is. I mean, she's Shadow Secretary of State for International Development. Well, she had been previously. But I mean, here's her career. Here's her career. I mean, genuinely, she worked in a supermarket. Great, that's good stuff. She worked for the Big Issue newspaper after graduating. She worked in the Unite Union and the NHS. She was an executive assistant to an out-of-hours GP. And then she got elected to National Executive of the Labour Party, became an MP. That's her career. On what basis this woman she has no qualifications or experience whatsoever.
I mean,
I would say you're someone who could really help drum up trade. She knows nothing about. I know nothing about trade, but I don't want to be a trade representative.
And what can happen is, and I've heard this as well. I've heard people on the left-wing economists say the private sector doesn't have a clue. They actually believe that
the public sector.
They believe the private sector. They believe the public sector can pick winners. That they choose what's best for everyone.
They are the Betamax. They are the Betamax of this thing. Well, Rachel Reeves, you're still speaking. It's going to go on. She started off by saying that economic growth is the #1 mission of this government, adding that it will help cut. This is great. It's going to help cut hospital waiting lists, meet climate goals, and give the next generation an opportunity to thrive. Word salad. Word salad. I mean, again, it's all madness. Let's also talk about the NHS. It comes up. A report from the Public Accounts Committee, which is a committee of MPs who know their stuff, because you have to understand numbers, maths, to be on the Public Accounts Committee. They've done some very hard-hitting reports previously under their previous Labour chairman, but now it's got a Tory chairman. But it's a cross-party group of MPs, and they've said basically they've been interviewing all the senior figures in the NHS, Department of Health, Permanent Secretary, the boss of the NHS, and they basically said that this is run by bureaucrats who are out of ideas. They are complacent. They've got no ideas. They've got no idea how to turn the NHS around. There's some good stuff coming out of government, some good plans, and there's just from the NHS. I mean, I've been saying this for years. You need to get rid of everybody in the top echelons. Everybody. People say they've got experience. their experience is of underachieving and failing.
I believe you. I mean, you know what? There's so many revolutionary things that are coming up, especially in tech and AI, that could speed up so many processes in the NHS, like diagnostics, for example. I mean, I had a terrible experience last year, mid-year. I had meningitis. I had to go to hospital for a week. I can say it was actually a positive experience because of the culture of the ward that I was in. It was absolutely incredible. And I think that's a lot of it as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have a good person who sets an excellent culture, and it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I've just been told by somebody, I haven't got a name, and can someone come quickly look this up. The trade envoy to New Zealand, the UK's trade envoy to New Zealand, has purple hair, worked as a barmaid and a dinner lady before getting, I mean, nothing wrong. I've been a barmaid, nothing wrong with being, nothing wrong with either of the jobs. Does it equip you to be a trade envoy? I'm just saying. There we are. Let's talk about this poll about the death penalty, though.
Interesting.
Public support for capital punishment has surged to 55%. This is a poll that was carried out by More in Common, the think tank, public opinion think tank, in the wake of the sentencing of the Southport attacker, Axel Rudik-Parna. And you cannot think of a crime that would more, you know, make people feel like... basically, so over half, 55% of people, it's definitely seen a good, strong growth in young people and middle-aged people like myself in terms of support for the death penalty. I think it's largely been round about 50% mark at least, pretty much forever, support for the death penalty. And I think a lot of people say, OK, they don't support it for lots of other crimes, but, you know, when you're talking about, you know, child killing, child rape, and like, you know, God, as I said last week, you know, I'm not in favour of the death penalty for moral reasons. I don't approve of... I don't think the state should be murdering people.
Yeah, me neither.
I think the risk of things getting it wrong, I think, is too high. I just want people to have a rotten life behind bars, and I don't care how much it costs. I really don't, as long as they are not on the streets. But I mean, if I could make an exception, people like Axel Rudik-Parna would be happily, and frankly, a lot of those grooming gangs would be happily on my list. However, I mean, of course, Axel Rudik-Parna was 17 when he committed his crime. He would not... crimes, he would therefore not have been eligible for this anyway. Where are you on this?
Yeah, so I'm against the death penalty for the reasons you said, very practical reasons. You know, you can even get things like false confessions. Someone can confess. I find it very interesting that people are becoming more and more conservative. It shows that people feel like the justice system maybe isn't working and people aren't being punished.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, I think, just tougher punishments. I mean, that's the key thing, isn't it? So much more I want to talk about, including what's happened in America with Trump's attempts to deal with the overreaching state and various other issues. We'll come to those. We're also going to talk more about immigration as well, those extraordinary immigration figures yesterday. Coming up next, we're going to take a quick break. Then I want to get to your calls, in particular on growth. But, you know, you can have your say on any topic, including capital punishment, anything else we've talked about, including the high-quality trade envoys we've got. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text on 87222. Get in touch with me on X at talkTV. I want to know from you. So Rachel Reeves delivers her speech saying growth will not come without a fight. She wants to expand airports. We think we're going to get that announcement on Heathrow. Third runway, creating Europe's Silicon Valley, you name it. Do you think any of this is going to deliver growth? Will it? Won't it? If you run your own business, I'd particularly love to hear from you, because you do know how to create growth, because you're literally doing it right now. Maybe you could give us some tips. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear? Will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this Parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence, and she has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. You had a little bit of break in your listening just a few moments ago. Sorry about that. All back on. Hope you can hear us all fine out. It wasn't your radio breaking, it was us. Sorry about that. Anyway, I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Candice Holdsworth is with us as well. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is still delivering her speech on growth and will bring you any developments if she does actually, say anything, practical, real, a proper announcement, then we will bring this to you, although she has talked about reducing the environmental burden on developers. That would be a good idea, wouldn't it?
Yes.
I mean, this stuff that, by the way, Labour was supporting until about 6 months ago, massively in favour of. But there we are, always happy with a sinner that repents. Always happy. I just don't think their memo's been read by most of the rest of the Labour Party, so it might be a problem.
But it's just incredible how quickly they've sort of been mugged by reality. It's just like cold, hard reality.
Such a great description.
But it's the markets as well, the market turmoil. And this is what happened to Thatcher. She faced market turmoil. She was able to course correct. She was able to get everything back on track. There are parallels. I think they know if they're going to keep this government together, they better start responding.
Yeah, you've got to deliver. The thing is also, again, we do have this issue in terms of our country is run on like 24/7 news cycle rather than even on it's not even run on a 5-year, election cycle.
Yes.
Whereas, you've got China and so they're running on a 50-year cycle. There is no forward planning, which is why we don't get any thanks for building a nuclear power station that isn't up and running when you're not in office, or for building a reservoir, or building a train line, or building an airport third runway. Even if Heathrow gets the go-ahead today, which seems quite likely as a third runway, I'd be surprised if I'm not collecting my pension by the time it actually it has a plane take off from it.
I will never forget Nick Clegg saying, I think it was in 2010, saying, oh, we're not going to build nuclear power stations because they won't come online for like another 10, 12 years. Then you get to 10, 12 years later, and you've got the highest energy prices in the world.
Yeah. Seriously, people really, really know. We really, really, really do need to start holding our politicians more to account. We really do. Anyway, let's get to your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to have yours. Say, David is on the line here next. David, Rachel Reeves is going to deliver growth. Is she?
Great. Well, Rachel and Keir, the only growth they're going to deliver, surely, is population replacement at 1 million a year for every year they're in office.
Oh, yeah, that's guaranteed.
That's the only growth. Yeah. I had this conversation with Anne Widdecombe the other day. Look, we've got to frame this correctly. We're not talking really with volumes of people of that magnitude, a million-ish, right? We're not talking about immigration anymore. Immigration was in the context of 30 to 40,000 a year where it was controlled. This isn't. This is something completely different. I've got to say, Julia, where's his mandate? Where's his authority to do this?
The Tories didn't have it, but Boris Johnson was the person who delivered the highest levels of net migration to this country. But you're saying that's the only growth we're going to get. Now, here's the thing. We've been told for years by the great and the good, the experts who know much better than us mere voters, that having immigration on a mass scale has been good for the economy. So we'll get more growth. With the more immigration we have, the more growth we will have, the higher our GDP.
I think that's an absolute nonsense. It's an absolute nonsense. That the country just is not capable of absorbing that amount of increase. There isn't the infrastructure. The systems are not there. And I think, to use an economic argument is just completely delusional. That's nonsense. It is utterly nonsense. But
but also, again, even when they talk about some of this growth they're going to deliver, it's fine. But, and even house building, 1.5 million homes over the next 4 or 5 years. But that still doesn't touch the side of the need now, let alone with an extra 5 million people in 7 years' time.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, if you were talking just about energy, and that's a critical thing. The Hinkley Point pile is an interesting one, because obviously that was something Lovegrove was working on when he brought China and the French in to do it. But we've known for years that the answer to our energy problems has been the small Rolls-Royce mini reactors.
Yeah. I mean,
the problem there is that the CIA blocked their civilian release because they saw it as nuclear proliferation. I understand there's been a change in that policy now.
Yeah.
There may well be some manufactured and put out there. But, of course, this is something they're, 30, 40 years behind the curve? The Royal Navy has been using those reactors successfully for, 40 years.
Mate, when you actually look into stuff, it's just depressing, isn't it? It's a lovely sunny day out there. Let's try and stay happy. Let's try and believe the madness. David, I really appreciate your call. Thank you for that. A few more texts and tweets before we go to another call. Sam says the only thing growing is public disdain. Victoria says Rachel Reeves is clueless. We need more than optimism. We need real plans for growth. Steve says this is really going to relate to and help working class people, not. Zach says get Labour out of here. This is a final straw. Daniel says, how does expanding an airport create growth? We need to ditch net zero. Actually, expanding airports does create growth. It's the ability to export more basically, the more we have massive hub airports in the UK, and they're going to be in London, that's where they're going to be, the more flights we have going in and out, more capacity for cargo, more capacity for people to meet and to go meet those hubs in China and India, the growing economies. I never really understood when people are talking about, no one leaves the airport. They actually just get on, move from one plane to another. How on earth does that help jobs? It does, 100%. That's why pretty much every other country is doing it. There's a reason why. Jennifer says, what happened to leading the world in AI and the green revolution? We're so far behind China and the US, we're not even on the same planet. And Andy says, zero chance of this delivering. The actual Silicon Valley is successful because enterprise is set free.
Yeah.
And interestingly, of course, Silicon Valley, a lot of it is now moving to Texas because of extra regulation and net zero rules in California. Any growth, says Andy, from airport expansion is many years away. Increase in national insurance, increase in other taxes, massive government inefficiency and red tape will ensure the UK still struggles. Well, Andy understands it. Shame the government doesn't. Let's go to the phone lines again. Peter is in London. Peter, you want to talk about the NHS and that report from MPs saying basically the problem is the bureaucracy at the top.
Yes, good morning, both. Yeah. I was a porter in the 90s. The population then was about 58 million.
Yeah.
It was a terrific hospital, and I loved every minute of it, Yeah. There was a lot less managers.
Yes.
Matron
was in charge of the ward.
Yeah, exactly, Julia. And since Blair, there should have been reform every 2 or so years, you know, and until these lefties admit that immigration is the main part of the NHS problem, there will be no reform. It will always be not fit for purpose.
No, but they constantly tell us that the immigration is the solution for the NHS because we import workers, although we have deliberate policies to restrict the number of people who train as doctors and nurses and other health experts in our own country, then import their students from other abroad, and then we import their trained staff. It's genuinely crazy that we do this, but there we are. Peter, thank you for that. 10:33 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to talk to independent economist Julian Jessup about what we've heard so far from Rachel Reeves' speech. An awful lot of it is being trailed. Will any of it deliver growth? Don't forget, keep your calls coming in. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Time is 10:36. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Candice Holdsworth still with me, and Chancellor Rachel Reeves is still delivering her speech in Oxfordshire, talking about delivering growth. Lots of very big words about dynamic and action and growth and top priorities. She has said already today that she has been genuinely shocked at how slow Britain's ridiculous planning system operates, despite the fact that Labour MPs, like pretty much every other MP, has been blocking pretty much every planning development in their own local area for decades. She said the government has delivered the most significant reforms to the planning system in a generation. I'm actually very much behind those planning reforms. We've got to build homes. We need to build everything. She says we're going to restart trade talks with India. Oh, look at, whippity-doo-dah. I mean, we should, but of course, we know what that trade deal will involve. More visas for foreign workers to come to the country. And again, as one of our callers just pointed out, David said, the only growth we're going to see is in immigrant population. She's also announced £65 million, this was expected, in electric vehicle charging points. I think it's like 30,000 charging points this is, but again, that's all very well for people who can afford them. But we know those charging points, if you're not charging it in your own home, you're actually paying a fortune to charge your car, and it's down the road often. Yes. Again, that's not going to make people buy a vehicle. She says she's going to invest in homegrown clean power. Again, the lights almost went off a few weeks ago. Let's talk about all this with Julian Jessup, who's an independent economist. Julian, anything you've heard so far from Rachel Reeves or in the pre-announcements that suggest we are going to see actual growth in this country?
Well, as you say, a lot of this was trailed beforehand, so there have been no real surprises so far. To be positive about this, I think there is a welcome change of tone. So she is sort of talking about boosting growth rather than just banging on about the poor state of the public finances. And
that negative talk in the first few months and for those and the budget, they really sort of killed off any hope for most people, didn't they?
Exactly. So if you look at what's happening in the United States, I think very few people really like Trump as a person, but they do like his policies and his positivity. And I think Rachel Reeves is trying to channel some of that today. So talk of a European Silicon Valley, for example, is a good example of that.
Yeah.
But there are some big problems here, and I sort of identified three already. One is that none of this is really new. Previous governments have been banging on about these things as well and haven't necessarily delivered.
Yeah. But they're saying they're changing the planning rules and pushing things through in with local objections. That's fundamentally what it's about. That's going to actually make it happen. It's unfortunate for people living locally, but we need it to happen.
Well, let's say if we take Heathrow as an example, I'm not sure if she's announced her approval of that yet.
No, not yet.
Many previous governments have done that, and it's still not happened. And of course, there's substantial opposition to that from within her own governing party. So that's
within their own cabinet.
Exactly.
Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, has basically said no.
Yeah. And the second problem is that a lot of what she says, of course, contradicts other things the government is doing. So whether it looks at the increased regulation of the labour market or energy policy or her own tax increases, so the government is doing one thing with one hand and then doing another with the other. So there's sort of mixed signals here. And then the third problem is that, none of this is going to rescue growth in the short term.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty convinced the economy is already in recession, at least in terms of output per head. But most of the things she says are not going to boost growth for many years and potentially even decades.
We shouldn't want to try and put off MPs and chancellors and prime ministers from trying to boost growth in the future, because that's the reason why we haven't built reservoirs, we haven't built nuclear power stations, we haven't built HS2, we haven't built anything, no extra runways, we haven't done anything because no one does long-term thinking. I'd like a little bit of long-term thinking and investment and doing the right thing that you might not get the credit for, you might get criticised for, but actually everyone secretly knows you need to get on with. I'm all in favour of that, and I really want to support wherever that happens, because my God, whether I voted for this Labour government or not, and I think you've got a clue about that, we need this government to be able to do something right, because, my God, people's livelihoods depend on it. It matters. But this is the thing. I don't think anyone believes this government, that Keir Starmer or Rachel Reeves or anyone in the Cabinet, or frankly virtually any Labour MP, has a clue how to grow the economy, has a clue how to run a business, has a clue how to boost growth in any meaningful way. They think that They think you say words and then somehow it happens. And it doesn't matter if your actions don't really back it up. Like you say, let's have growth, but then you put up the cost of literally hiring a new employee, you know, a few months ago. That whatever you said doesn't count for toffee if you're stopping people hiring.
Well, I think that's right. I'm not the first person to point out the lack of any real business experience in the cabinet, and I'll be particularly worried actually about Keir Starmer and Number 10. I think Rachel Reeves is clearly going to have big battles with her cabinet colleagues over the next few months and years. But is she really going to get support from the Prime Minister, who has, of course, no economics background, no economics expertise to back him up? And I think a lot of what she's proposing now will just get bogged down in internal party politics. To be more optimistic, though, at least the government does have a clear parliamentary majority.
Yeah.
So if it wants to push things through, it can, which hasn't necessarily been true of
Well, yeah, I mean, sorry, Boris Johnson had a majority of 80, okay, working majority of around about 60 for a lot of the time. He could have pushed things through. Yeah, we had COVID, yeah. But we had enough years when stuff could have been happening. There's no excuse.
Yes, I mean, there's certainly no excuse for this government not to deliver on what it's promising. But I think you've also identified another problem, a sort of fundamental problem with their philosophy, which is, on the one hand, to boost the economy, to drive growth, but on the other, to transfer even more money and power and responsibility from the private sector to the public sector, whether that's through higher taxes or more regulation in vital areas of the economy, or higher pay for public servants in areas which are not particularly productive.
Yeah, so indeed. But
there
also,
are lots of issues and problems there.
Yeah, but also this idea, something Candice Holdsworth touched on earlier, the government, the public sector think that they're the ones who can pick the winners. You know, they'll whether it's any new version of clean energy or, or we decided to pick, heat pumps as the winner in the clean energy for heating our homes and things. They rarely get these things right. The market gets things right. We know that because that's how we've delivered massive prosperity across the Western world since industrialisation. The market delivers. There's no evidence that the public sector is very good at picking winners.
That's absolutely right. And I think one mistake that a lot of Labour politicians do is that they compare a sort of idealised world of super bright civil servants and politicians making decisions with some sort of model of the private sector that I don't recognise at all. I mean, the reality is the private sector is far from perfect, but it almost always delivers much better results than civil servants sitting in Whitehall or Westminster.
Yeah, absolutely. Just so you know, Rachel Reeves said that she's going to back plans by the Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham for the redevelopment of the Old Trafford. She has the plans to create new housing, commercial development, a new stadium, which could generate growth to the tune of £7 billion every year.
Could I just come in on that?
Yeah.
I think that's a good example of something that almost certainly would have happened anyway. I think it's inconceivable that a Conservative government wouldn't allow the redevelopment of the Old Trafford site. So to claim that as a win, I think, is pushing your luck a little bit.
And there's going to be a lot of that going on. And again, a lot of the things we're going to be seeing are going to be things that are just necessities. They have to happen. Let's go back to the fundamental big elephant in the room. I mean, it's just like the trunk is kind of hitting my head, and it's like, well, I'm talking. And that is net zero. Forget, you've got Ed Miliband, who is a complete sort of religious zealot on this issue, as the Energy Secretary, who's opposed to things like Heathrow expansion and pretty much anything that would actually improve our economy. But the government has said repeatedly, the top priority is, green jobs and net zero and delivering net zero targets, but then also growth. Now, these things are mutually incompatible. There is no growth with a commitment to net zero. It is perfectly possible that under the laws that we currently have, that there'll be legal frankly, cases that could absolutely win by the eco-zealots under net zero laws to prevent a third runway at Heathrow because of anything that stops us achieving our climate goals is actually illegal, bizarrely, in this country. The government's, put this in place and Labour has supported it. Can they possibly deliver any reasonable level of growth whilst committed to net zero by 2050, but also, crucially, 95% clean, renewable energy, electricity by 2030?
Well, I've got nothing against the principle of net zero in itself, and a 2050 deadline, I think, is realistic. But you've identified actually the bigger problem, which is unrealistic targets for 2030. Now, there's some interesting analysis published earlier this week by an independent firm called Cornwall Insights that showed the government is way off track for hitting its 2030 targets.
What a surprise.
And they flagged up a concern that if you set a target, you look like you're going to miss it, you panic. You do all sorts of sort of short-term things. You bung more money to your friends who've donated large amounts of money to the party in order to subsidise renewables, whatever else it might be. And you end up potentially actually driving up energy costs in the short term, coming up with solutions that actually in the longer term damage energy security.
Yep.
And that could be one of the ways all of this unravels. We have, the Chancellor trying to go for growth, but that running up against the targets that have been set by Miliband and others that actually hold back growth and result in higher energy prices and less energy security would otherwise have.
Funny enough, companies are not going to be making their homes here if they can't afford the energy costs of running those businesses. Julian Jessup, independent economist, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts on that. Candice Holdsworth, do you want to come back on?
Yes, I agree with you. I believe that net zero and growth are fundamentally incompatible. I just think that all the evidence points to that. You have to deal with the material reality. You can't be some zealot who has some religious belief in something.
Net zero, we're not going to achieve net zero in 2050. It's not going to save the planet. It is not achievable. It's not affordable. It's not possible.
Yes.
The 2030 target is definitely impossible. Why are grown-ups spending their time on this nonsense?
Yes.
Let the students hold their placards up. And no grown-up, no one in government should be wasting their time with this nonsense. Yeah, let's go towards cleaner energy. Absolutely, 100%, all in favour. But the net zero target, and again, it's also mathematical nonsense because anything we import wouldn't count towards that. So we can just have everything made in China in a coal-fired manufacturing plant, shipped over in an oil tanker, and it arrives in our country. Ka-ching! Net zero for us. Well done. Oh, I mean,
time to face reality.
I mean, my God, if there's one thing I've got a mission on right now, it's this. 10:47 is the time. We're going to take a break. Up next, we're going to talk about, delivering the NHS. Growth, apparently, from Rachel Reeves is going to help us with the NHS. Is it really? Because a new report from MPs says, actually, the people running the NHS, the bureaucrats, the civil servants, actually, they are out of ideas. Is it time to sack all of them? This is Talk, the home of common sense.
It's obviously a very horrid situation for everybody. There is some disquiet, is there not, at the very least, about the way that the authorities have handled all of this.
At the moment, I think people here are just in that panicked fight or flight mode. It really is. You're in the lap of the gods. Everybody's on edge. Nobody feels safe.
As you know, where I live is on fire right now. Literally, the entire city of the Pacific Palisades is burning.
Any message from you to Governor Newsom or Karen Bass tonight?
Spend less on hair gel. What can I say to them? Not big admirer of either.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just breaking news for you. It's official, folks. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has said that the government does back the building of a third runway at Heathrow Airport. She says that runway could increase potential GDP by, wait for it, 0.43% by 2050. That's assuming it's built by 2050. Says it could create over 100,000 jobs. Now, they won't be at the airport necessarily, but it's just about the ability for people to export more easily when you have a bigger airport hub with more international flights going in and out. It has a massive impact. She says the last full-length runway in Britain was built in the 1940s. No progress in 8 years has hurt the UK, and Heathrow is at the heart of the UK's openness as a country and connects us, she says, to emerging markets all over the world, opening up new opportunities for growth. My home, I'm actually in North London, but we can hear the planes at Heathrow quite often. I'm perfectly content to hear the planes at Heathrow if that will boost our economy. Candice Holdsworth?
Yeah, I'm the same. You know, sometimes when you hear people's objections to things, I mean, it's just so trivial. You think, oh my goodness, you know, don't you want to live in a prosperous country?
Also, if you live that near the airport, you've moved there since there was an airport there. Yes. Sorry, I'm really sorry. Well, let's. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Do you back the third runway? Bear in mind, we had a former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who said he would literally lie down in front of the bulldozers. Do you give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Is this a good sign they're actually going to back it? It's going to be battles in Cabinet. There's going to be legal battles. I don't think it's... I think I'll be collecting my pension long before this runway is actually built. But is it a good sign? Is it a sign of hope? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. In the meantime, let's talk about where we have very little hope, and that is the NHS being reformed. Wonder why? Well, MPs on the Public Accounts Committee have a pretty good idea. They have issued a report today saying that the NHS is run by bureaucrats who they say lack ideas and are obstructing the reforms needed to fix it. The committee, which is headed by a Tory MP, Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, but is a cross-party committee, has said that the government's ambitions to overhaul the health service represent a golden opportunity to improve care, but the bosses aren't willing to make the necessary changes. And basically, they said the systemic issues plaguing the NHS, and they said we were aghast to find among senior officials in charge, and they've interviewed all of them on the committee, in charge of delivering these ambitions, some of the worst complacency displayed to the committee in their time serving on it. Well, let's talk about this with Dr. Lawrence Buckman. He's a GP and former chair of the BMA's GPs Committee. Very good morning to you, Lawrence.
Morning.
It's very interesting. I've been saying this for years. Actually, the biggest problem, it's not, you know, the work of the NHS doctors or nurses. It is the people running it. It's the Department of Health Permanent Secretary. It is the Whitehall civil servants. Crucially, it's also, you know, the chief executive of the NHS and a huge number of bureaucrats. This is what the MPs are saying.
Yeah, they're right.
Simple as that. They're right.
Yeah. And there are good examples of what happens if you ignore the lead weight in the NHS. The best example is one you and I have talked about many times, which is the COVID response, where out of nowhere they created an entire division of the NHS to deliver COVID care for the entire population. It must have cost a lot of money, I'm sure, and I was one of the doctors working for it. They recruited hundreds and hundreds of doctors who are retired or just retiring. They enabled IT that would never happen before, where everything joined up with everything else. It was easily doable. And what happened was they had very good, wise management who got on with it and made change happen.
Can-do people, yeah.
Yes. And they did the whole thing. And yet we seem to be unable to do that in other contexts of the health service.
Yeah.
And some of that's to do with recruitment and retention of staff. We have nowhere near the kind of workforce to deliver what people quite reasonably expect of a health service.
But a lot of that is down, A, we don't train enough people, and B, a lot of people don't want to work in the NHS because it's so demoralising. And that's down to management.
I'm afraid so. I work in part of the NHS that sends me a birthday card and a Christmas card and is nice to me. And when I phone up the office, they say yes. Whereas no other part of the NHS I've ever worked in did that. That kind of behaviour only has to be translated and costs almost nothing and would make the most enormous difference to retention.
Yeah, well, just people feeling valued, but also people feeling they can do the job they want to do to their highest ability and treat the patients and not be, you know, people not getting the care they need or arriving, you know, at A&E, for instance, and not getting treated for hours on end or even days on end. I mean, this is the thing. Whenever I've seen Amanda Pritchard, the NHS chief executive, being interviewed, I have to say, how anyone thought this woman was up to this job is an embarrassment. For a start, she's told a blatant lie about, you know, COVID patients on wards, which should have been a sacking offence, something that she quite deliberately lied about a couple of years ago, which I thought was incredibly damning of her. She's a sort of a lifetime, you know, NHS employee, bureaucrat. We know that bureaucrats get hired and fired. They get rid of some, they rearrange the deck chairs, and then these same people are brought back with their big redundancy packages on more money as a freelancer consultant. It's a gravy train what's going on in the NHS right now. But there's no evidence that a lot of these people are really any good at running hospitals or running a healthcare service.
Well, that's not because that's not their primary job. Their primary job is to save money for the government.
They're not doing that either.
No, they're not. No. And it needs original thought. It needs people who will get on with it. You know, if we could do it during the pandemic, we've now got a different problem, which is we've got a huge number of people who are not getting the care that they need. Yeah. No doctor is proud of that because it looks terrible. And I wouldn't want to be treated like that if I were a patient, which, of course, like everybody else, I am potentially. Yeah. Yeah. And we need to have the wit and enthusiasm to engage the workforce and to engage everybody within the NHS, even not the frontline people, to actually saying, we can do it. Yeah. And I'm afraid, I'd love to say the MPs are wrong, but they're not.
No, exactly. But even down anyone who's had any experience, I mean, I'm always just amazed, just, you know, booking, you know, I don't know, booking a mammogram, or just like, I've just had an appointment which has been made for me, like, it was 3 or 4 months notice. I got 3 notices yesterday. Amazingly, I got them on email, didn't have to wait for a letter that was then superseded by another letter that was already out of date. So moving the appointment by a month, telling me that I've cancelled the appointment and moved it. I haven't done that. I'll be penalised if I had. I mean, it's just, you know, just abject incompetence in the bureaucracy, which I think is what breaks a lot of patients' souls as well, and I think is at root of a lot of the problems. But I mean, again, I just don't see how we're going to reform the NHS with so many people who are at top-level jobs, paid, by the way, very big 6-figure salaries, who clearly have proven themselves not to be very good at it. Not least the fact that you say, well, they did well treating people with COVID during the lockdowns. Yeah, that was in return for not treating anyone else. We were the only healthcare service in the world that did that, and people have died. Much younger people than those who were dying of COVID have died as a result of that. And again, I think people should be going to prison for that, let alone being made redundant. But, you know, I'm old-fashioned. I think healthcare services should be there for everybody. Thank you so much, Dr. Lawrence Buckman. Thank you for that. Candice, I mean, look, you've had a lot of experience with the healthcare, you know, all these babies and the like. I mean, what do you make? What do you make of this MP's committee report?
Yes, yeah, well, my experience of maternity care is absolutely appalling. It's the worst. We've had inquiry after inquiry after inquiry. Something needs to change.
There's a reason why more mums and babies die here than in comparable countries.
And it's also just the most miserable experience. Most people will tell you going through maternity care is just the worst way to start parenthood.
Mine was 18 years ago and I was drugged out of my soul. Yes, I've never done drugs before or since, but God, that was fun.
But I would recommend that.
Yeah. Legal drugs when in birth, when in labour, absolutely.
Get it all. But I think you're so right. You know, more scrutiny needs to be applied to the management of the NHS. I've always said it. Why does no one hold the CEO, Amanda Pritchard, more accountable? Yeah. If this was any other company, if this was a private business...
If she was running Tesco, she'd have been sacked long ago. Utterly unfair. I just think you have to have a massive sweep out. Have them reapply. I mean, but I want them to bring in someone. I've always said, bring in someone who can do logistics at Tesco. Yes. That is the person I want running the NHS. Because it's the logistics job board. They're not the people delivering injections, for goodness sake. 10:59 is the time. We're going to go to a quick break, get news, more on what Rachel Reeves has to say. This is Talk.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show if you've been listening. If you've not been, well, waggy finger. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Very, very much appreciate you joining me. So much to talk about today, and whether you are listening to us on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, or watching on YouTube or on your connected device, as I say, always great to have your company. Coming up in this hour, Rachel Reeves, I think, is still talking. Best part of an hour so far. She's been speaking this morning in Oxfordshire about plans to, well, boost growth. Yeah, more talk of dynamism and action and the like. She has confirmed, as many were expecting, that the government, not just Rachel Reeves, the government backs the building of a third runway at Heathrow Airport. She said it could increase GDP by up to 0.4% of GDP and create over 100,000 jobs. This is something which we know even the Prime Minister voted against, only 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago. That's interesting. She's also unveiled more plans to create Europe's Silicon Valley in the Oxford-Cambridgeshire corridor, and a raft of policies to grow the region, extra transport, house building and the like. Also backing the Old Trafford, housing and retail and commercial redevelopment as well, and many more things announced as well. So we've got some specifics, some of which we kind of knew were going to happen already, whether frankly Labour win or not. Some new things like, runway backing. I'd love to hear from you about that. I would love to know, is this going to deliver growth? Particularly, I'd love to hear from you on the Heathrow third runway and the Silicon Valley. Do get in touch. Will this deliver growth? Yes or no? Tell us why it will. Tell us why it won't. Particularly would love to hear from you if you are someone who is creating wealth in this economy. No disrespect to those in the public sector, no disrespect to people like me or, jobbing PAYE employees, but people who've started your own business. If you've started your own business, whether you employ 100,000 people or 2 people, I want to hear from you. What would actually help growth for you? What would help you expand, earn more, pay more tax and employ more people? That's what we want, don't we? Get in touch, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk, then your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs 1 standard network rate message. Also going to be talking more about the death penalty. Majority of Brits in this country, Brits generally, support bringing back the death penalty. It's the strongest support, 52% that has been seen in polls for a very long time, particularly, obviously, I think in the wake of the Axel Rudikapana sentencing last week, 52 years behind bars. Also going to be talking about the prospect of the BBC licence fee effectively being expanded to households that only watch streaming services such as Netflix or Disney+. They could be forced to pay the BBC licence fee too, the plans being considered by the government. And we're going to talk about what is going on stateside because, wow, Donald Trump is showing everyone how to do it. He announced a freeze on hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in federal grants and loans to various different state-run agencies. That, though, was halted late last night by a US judge. He froze that minutes before it was about to come into effect. He's also offered mass redundancy to millions of federal employers. Bye-bye, thanks very much. We don't need your services anymore. We'll talk about that as well. So much more coming up. Joining me for all the chat, I'd like to say, is Candice Holdsworth. She's a writer and commentator. Candice, just in terms of what we've heard from Rachel Reeves today, we've actually had some substance, as we were expecting. Not just the Chancellor, but the government, she says, backs a third runway at Heathrow Airport. I have been talking about and writing about this third runway at Heathrow Airport ever since I was a political journalist. So I've been talking about, I'm a journalist, for 30 years, because I am that old. But I know this has been something that has been talked about since before I was born.
Yeah.
Do you think it's ever going to happen?
Well, I hope so. That, like you say, there's been a huge... You can't just speak these things into action. I'm glad that they are speaking more pragmatically and optimistically and doing all these things that should never have been blocked.
Practical, tangible things.
Yes. But of course, it's all about the execution, how these things will be brought about, who's going to oppose it. I mean, you've got people like Sadiq Khan saying he's going to oppose it. Yeah. I wonder what Ed Miliband will say. He's sort of softened his tone a little bit.
Well, basically, he threatened to resign from Gordon Brown's company. And this has been an issue for every government, Labour, Tory, coalition. And we've always got people like Ed, voting, saying that they would resign if it went ahead. Thing is, if he resigned, I've got a funny feeling the Keir Starmer would be quite pleased. I think he's already thinking, why the hell did I give this lunatic a job?
Well, this is the thing. But I just can't believe it. People have been living in fantasy land, in la-la land, as if the world will just wait, as if prosperity, it's just guaranteed. You don't have to do anything for it. Just keep bumbling along. We'll always be one of the world's wealthy economies. Yeah. Meanwhile, you've got countries all over the world. They're just steaming ahead.
Yeah, and people, again, we're constantly told, oh, look how bad we're doing after Brexit. Have you seen what's happening in Germany?
Yes.
Oh my God, so Germany's entering its third year of recession, for goodness sake. It's absolute nonsense. Yeah. But it's one interesting thing, some of the lines from what Rachel Reeves had to say. We're talking about how for too long people have been complacent. We've been willing to do this. We've been willing to put up with low growth. We've been willing to, well, maybe you have, love.
Yeah.
I haven't.
No.
I don't think my listeners and my watchers have had. I don't think we've been willing to do that. We've had to put up with it while you lot mess it up. And I completely accept Labour haven't been in power for 14 years. But when they say, oh, we've not built a reservoir since 1992, well, you were in power from 1997 to 2010. And by the way, the economy was booming then. There was spare money. We still had North Sea oil revenue to bank. You know what Norway did with theirs? Set up a wealth fund. Isn't it something like 4% of the wealth in the world is owned by the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, and they're only allowed to spend, I think, 3 or 4% a year because it has to be kept for future generations. So they took that amazing boom from North Sea oil, and they say they've invested. It has to be spent on infrastructure. It can't be spent on day-to-day spending, building roads, building hospitals, building infrastructure. If only we had politicians who thought like that. If only we did.
We did. And Brexit, that was like ordinary people trying to be optimistic about the future and saying, come, we can take our destiny in our own hands and we can plot our own course.
I think we probably need Brussels to help us, don't we?
But this is it, right? It's this sort of wringing hands, we're so useless, we're so hopeless, and it's just awful, and it's no one believes that.
But again, this is it. When they say that is what they think.
Yes,
that is what they think. But also the people saying we should build this stuff now. You voted against this. You have campaigned in your local constituency, in your local paper, against all of the things you now say you want to do. Yes. And by the way, the Tories, and we're going to be talking to a Tory guest in a very few minutes. He's the Shadow Housing Secretary, Kevin Holloway. The Tories are just as bad on this. Yes. They talked a good game, didn't get anything done in so many years. Yeah, they went through austerity. Yes, we had a lot. Yeah, we've had all of that. But still, the business of doing long-term planning and things needs to be done. By the way, Ed Miliband, the Energy Security and Net Zero Secretary, again, those things are mutually she's exclusive. He did once threaten back in 2009 to resign over Heathrow expansion when he worked in Gordon Brown's government before he, and again it still blows my mind, before he became Labour leader himself. Still a mind-blowing time, the Edstone. When you look back elections, who was the leader of the party? Ed Miliband was actually potentially our Prime Minister at one point. How scary is that? He's not at Rachel Reeves' speech this morning. A lot of the Cabinet are there. Rachel Reeves is speaking right now in Oxfordshire. Ed Miliband apparently has told reporters that his sources close to him have said he's busy in meetings today. He's busy trying to kill growth in this country with net zero, while the Chancellor is saying what she wants to do. Interestingly, the Rachel Reeves has been asked today about whether she will commit to cutting net migration, even if it damages economic growth. By the way, the lie we've been told for years, and it came up in the last hour, this idea that mass levels of net migration and immigration into this country is good for the economy. Well, if it was the last 20 years we've had mass immigration, if it was, we'd be booming by now. We would be Singapore, guys, and we ain't. So that's a bit... That is such a typical question from the mainstream media, even if it damages economic growth.
Yes.
I mean, they never ask that about net zero normally, but she has said we will reduce net migration, she says, but taking back control means having more say of who comes into this country. Yeah, Boris Johnson said that, and we were seeing, 1.2 more million people coming into this country, net migration of, 700, 800,000 a year, more people in the country. The stats we had yesterday were based on an assumption of around 340,000 more people coming to live in the country from abroad than leaving every year. It's been way more than that for years. I know they've made some visa controls that may well bring it down. It's unlikely to be that. Even the projections that by 2032 we'll have a population that is 5 million higher than it was in 2022. If you look at those projections, if you look at the projections from last year, and the year before and the year before that, they have been so catastrophically wrong and always in the same direction. They always massively underestimate that growth. I think, as one of our guests pointed out yesterday, we're looking at realistically in the next 10 years, we're having a population of 80 million.
And they're refusing to just grasp the nettle of things like welfare reform. So they're using immigration to plug all those gaps in things like social care, for instance.
Because our people won't do those jobs.
Yeah.
Well, why? Because the wages are so low.
And I've heard Conservative politicians say, well, what are we going to do about the falling birth rate? Where are we going to get future employers from?
And Candice can't have babies for everyone. She's churned out 3 people. She's done her bit.
But it's crazy that we're talking about it like that right now. Mad. So, like, my 3 children, or however children you have, they are going to be taxpayers one day. We've got, you actually have to think about things like that. Yeah. New Labour sort of seeded that narrative when they were sort of trying to, they say, rescue industries that couldn't find workers, and they started with mass immigration. Yep. But actually, no, what they should have done is those businesses should have innovated, they should have adapted, is once again interfering in the economy, trying to pick winners. Yeah. And this is what happens.
Yeah, and indeed, and again, the business love mass immigration because they're not paying all the housing costs. We're subsidising their low wages for migrants by paying for everyone's housing benefits and other benefits and paying for higher costs of homes. And, the economics of this are crazy. And I've been talking about this for years and years and years. And of course, everyone just shouts bigot and far right at you, and but I've been right. Just going back to Heathrow runway, London Mayor Sadiq Khan, never right about anything. London Mayor Sadiq Khan says he remains opposed to the Heathrow runway. He's talked about being involved in legal challenges on this. Again, that's what most of the Labour shadow cabinet would have said, 8 months ago, for goodness sake. So that's going to be a bit of fun to watch, isn't it? I'm going to enjoy that. And it is fascinating to see the front page of the Mail today. Certainly businesses basically saying to government, yeah, all right, you're talking about growth, but stop punishing us with anti-growth measures like national insurance rise.
But this is it. Can we please just have a bit of cheer business a little bit. They're talking about themselves. We're going to kickstart growth. We're going to do all of this.
You're not doing anything.
What about people who start businesses, who actually employ people, who make payroll every month? Come on.
But they have no. But that's why they increased national insurance employer contributions. It was a little rinky-dink way of getting out of that. Yes. We won't increase taxes on workers, but it does increase tax on workers. It's a workers' tax. Yes. It just happens to be paid by the employer on the sheet. But it is extraordinary. If they had ever employed anybody, they would understand the extra cost of employing that marginal extra worker. And every time a supermarket or an engineering firm or a shop say, shall we employ an extra person to do that work because we're a bit stretched?
Yeah.
What is the cost of employing that person versus the benefit to the company and the profit margin?
Absolutely.
And again, there are people on The Apprentice in episode 1. Yes. There are people who win The Apprentice who don't seem to understand this basic, basic stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's anyone in government understands it, that's for sure. We talked about the NHS a bit earlier, being run by bureaucrats out of ideas. I think we all agreed on that. Let's also talk about what is going on in America. An amazing first week from Donald Trump. I don't agree with everything, but oh my God, I would love some of these measures to happen here. He had announced a freeze on tens and tens of billions of dollars of taxpayers' money in America going out on federal grants and loans to huge number of government agencies. Now, we know that we have exactly the same in the UK. Huge amounts of money are spent on Quango this, Quango that, in administration doing this, doing that. He's basically put a complete freeze on everything. It was due to come into force yesterday. At 5 o'clock, a judge, Lauren Ali Khan, put a freeze on it and said, no, you can't freeze this. Now, there was a lot of concern that people wouldn't get their individual, like food stamps, individual stuff. We were told, no, it's not going to affect individuals. It's not about, if you're getting money from the government to basically pay your basic bills, it's not going to affect you. It's about all these different bodies. There's obviously going to be a massive, court case about this. They're obviously going to take this forward. But there's no doubt at all, the White House, the way that you have that separation of powers, federal budget and everything is effectively under executive control, and the president has executive power.
Yes.
He should be able to do this. But one of the other fascinating things that they've announced is clearly an Elon Musk thing, because he basically did this at Twitter, didn't he, really? They're offering federal workers the chance to take what's called a deferred resignation, i.e. you'll get redundancy money for 8 months. So basically agree to resign now, you're going to get paid through to September. They expect 5 to 10% of federal workforce workers to quit. They reckon that will save them around $100 billion in taxpayers' money. They think that roughly 2 million people will basically be offered this buyout and bye-bye, thank you very much, you're gone. I mean, I'd love us to do this here. My only worry is that good people who can get a job somewhere else will take the redundancy and go and get a job somewhere else, and then you're stuck with the people who are really useless.
Oh, well, that's the thing. The problem is, we sort of have to choose. Are we just going to continue heaping pressure on businesses? So, keep making them fund the cost of everything? Or are we actually going to confront the size of the state?
Yeah.
And Labour haven't done that. They talked about we're making the tough decisions. But what are the tough decisions?
They're not even willing to get people to come back in from sitting on their sofa working.
Yeah, it's like the winter fuel allowance, which is puny in comparison to things like welfare reform. It's the farm tax, which isn't going to raise that much money and could threaten food security, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, they are not making the tough decisions. The tough decisions is confronting the massive size of the state. And the thing is, like you say, it's not stuff like, very important entitlements in the US that people need. You have to make a choice. Are you going to have borrowing? Are you going to have high taxes? Or are you going to look at cutting this thing, which you said right at the beginning of the programme, is leeching off a lot of this?
Absolutely, absolutely. Candice Holsworth, thank you very much. Love to hear your thoughts on this. Chancellor Rachel Reeves unveiling policies for growth, expanding Silicon Valley, this and that, Old Trafford expansion, lots of important stuff. Crucially, also a third runway at Heathrow. Do you think it'll ever happen? Really? Do you think it'll ever happen? The London Mayor Sadiq Khan says he remains opposed to it. Indeed, the Prime Minister himself was opposed to it only a few years ago. What's changed? I mean, the economic argument hasn't changed at all. So what's changed? I'd love to hear your thoughts. 03444 499 1000. Will any of this achieve growth? Do get in touch. We'll get your numbers, your calls on air. Up next, going to talk to Tory MP Kevin Hollyrick. He is the Shadow Housing Secretary. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Candice Holdsworth still with me. Don't forget to get your calls in 0344 499 1000. Delighted to welcome right now the Shadow Housing Secretary, Conservative MP, Kevin Hollinrake, to the show. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Well, I'm sure you've been glued to your radio, your television, watching and listening to what Rachel Reeves has had to say about growth. It's not just words. There's some actual, real hard stuff in there. We're talking about backing this Old Trafford expansion, a lot about this Oxford, Cambridge, Silicon Valley, but also the expectation we had all this morning was that we were going to get that announcement, and we've got it. Not just Rachel Reeves, the government. That means the cabinet collectively are backing a third runway at Heathrow. A, do you think it'll ever happen? And B, will all of this deliver the growth that she talks so much about?
Well, let's see. I mean, Heathrow, in principle, I'm not against Heathrow. It's something I voted for myself in previous parliaments. I think it's some real logistical difficulties around Heathrow. I don't fancy the taxpayer having to pick up the tab to move the M25, for example, and move it where when you've got reservoirs all around where it is right now. So there's some challenges. But again, we believe we want economic growth. We want to see these big projects rolled out more quickly. But I find it pretty galling, the whole thing. Rachel Reeves has killed the economy, and now he's talking about growth and boosterism. I mean, she killed the economy in three ways. She talked the country down for 6 months, put the fear of God into every business person in the UK and anybody thinking of moving here. She then whacked massive tax increases on business of £25 billion a year and expects business to just suck it up. And coming down the track, there are huge amount of red tape for businesses in the shape, particularly of the Employment Rights Bill, which will wrap business up in red tape, will hit hiring, reduce the number of jobs, and reduce the level of pay increases people will have. So all of which are important for growth.
Yeah, although interestingly, the one thing you didn't mention there was net zero policies, which of course your last government completely pursued as well, which are completely the opposite of delivering growth. There aren't going to be 500,000 green jobs. They're going to cut them. Net zero is the opposite of growth. And you guys supported all that and still do.
Well, I was never against gas and oil exploration, not at all. We'll need gas for many years to come. I'm not against rolling out renewable energy projects where they make financial sense, and offshore wind is...
That wasn't what your government's policy was.
What, offshore wind?
No, your government's policy was hitting net zero targets, which involved impoverishing the economy and making energy less secure and less cheap.
Well, I don't think that's right, actually.
I think it is right.
It wasn't the fact that our government outlawed oil and gas exploration licenses as this government is doing. What it was, actually, the banks in their ESG, in the drive towards environmental sustainability, all the kind of all these kind of goals they set themselves, backed away from funding those.
But it was all put into law under Theresa May's government, under a Conservative government. A lot of this goes back to. No, I'm sorry, I'm not letting you off the hook on this one. The Tories, you're just as plague on all your houses. You're just as bad on this front.
Listen, I think net zero at some point is deliverable. What Kemi is saying, or under new leadership, is what we should do is put the plans in place to how we get there is the point, and then you can decide.
We're not going to get there this century. It's unachievable. It's unaffordable. It's impossible. And while your party still backs it, you are never getting back into power. There's some free political advice to you, Kevin. You're welcome.
I had a debate with Nigel Farage about this. He's not a climate change denier. He thinks we should achieve that.
No one mentioned climate change denial. That's the sort of ridiculous nonsense thing that people say. I'm talking about the clear, hard facts that if you don't have reliable, cheap, secure energy, and that only comes in the form of fossil fuels right now, you are not going to have a booming economy. End of, full stop. That's it. Nothing to discuss.
I said, Julie, we're in violent agreement. I always been in favour of gas exploration.
You were you were a member of a government that was pushing the exact opposite of that. But let's move on from that, Kevin. Look, let's move on from that. When it comes to things like Heathrow, so you're in favour of Heathrow. Look, we've had votes recently. The Prime Minister currently, Keir Starmer, voted against Heathrow expansion only a few years ago. I mean, we know the Energy Secretary is opposed to it. There's been a tweet from the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, Labour Mayor, of course, saying he remains opposed to a third runway at Heathrow. He says because of the severe impact it will have on noise, air pollution and, of course, meeting our climate change targets. He's going to look at the impact it will have and the huge knock-on effects on our transport infrastructure, as you mentioned, the M25, but he's not convinced that you can have hundreds of thousands of additional flights at Heathrow every year without a hugely damaging impact on our environment. Why do you think the government, the Labour Party, have changed their minds on Heathrow? And do you think realistically, given net zero rules and legal challenges and the like, that I'm not going to be, frankly, not just on retirement, but in my grave before that third runway does actually happen?
Well, the reason they're going for it now is because they're panicking. Because having killed growth in the economy, they now say they're flailing around anything that might stimulate growth. And you're right to say this is a long-term plan in terms of Heathrow, so not deliverable in the short term to return the economy to growth as we saw under the Conservative government, but that's not going to fix this problem. Can I say the other thing about this is Labour are no strangers to saying one thing and doing another. Look at Rachel Reeves. In my area, the number one airport in Yorkshire is Leeds Bradford Airport. So Rachel Reeves opposed. It wasn't even expansion, it was just a rebuilding of the terminal, an ancient terminal there, on the basis she didn't want to see more passengers go through Leeds Bradford Airport.
Yeah.
I mean, saying one thing and doing another. They're no strangers to hypocrisy. It's completely outrageous. They're doing it now because they have no idea how to run this economy, have never been involved in anything in terms of the productive economy ever before in their careers.
OK, I would agree with a lot of that. Here's the thing. What was going on before July the 4th last year? Because I don't recall us living in this amazing booming economy where the Tory government, who absolutely understood all of these things, they'd been building reservoirs and power stations and house building and were totally in control and growth was booming. Could you, I mean, I don't know, maybe I was asleep for some of those years or I've just got amnesia, but I don't recall it being any better then, do you?
I do, actually.
Do you?
When Labour inherited the economy in July this year, the UK, as you will acknowledge, was the fastest growing economy in the G7.
It was.
That's the reality. Faster than US, Canada and every other major European
but everyone was doing badly.
Well, we grew at 0.7% in the first quarter.
That's life-changing. Life-changing.
It is.
Come on.
It annualises it over 2.5% growth. That's a much better rate of growth. Of course, there are things we didn't do that we should have done. We did many things right. But one of the things we were trying to do when we put the measures in place, and Michael Gove, my predecessor when he was in government, set in place work in terms of accelerating those big projects, nationally significant infrastructure project status, which currently take 4.5 years to get planning consent. They used to take 2.5 years. He put the things in place. He was cutting down the need for environmental assessments. He was taking away some of the legal challenge opportunities. Well, let's go through all the things we did right in 14 years.
You did. There are a lot of things I did agree with, but 14 years.
OK, let's talk about 40 years. The UK was the third highest growth in the G7 in those 14 years. 4 million more jobs in our economy. 1.2 million fewer people out of work. Street crime down 0.5%. Our schools, 90% of them good or outstanding, rather than 66% when we took over. The best readers and the best in terms
schools
of
improved,
mathematics in the Western world. Many improvements. We got some things wrong. Let's put this in context.
OK, one of the things do you think that you got wrong was immigration? Because we talk about growth, we're told constantly by everybody, all the great and the good, all the experts, that mass immigration is good for growth. If it was, we would have seen a lot more growth over the last 20 years when we've seen so many millions more people arrive on our shores. ONS data out out yesterday, latest projections looking at us over a period from 2022 to 2032. In just 7 years' time, we're going to see another 5 million more people net in this country from abroad than we have currently. Bearing in mind their projections have been vastly out of kilter every year for years and always in the same direction. They vastly underestimate. Was that a mistake from Labour on immigration, and what would you do differently now?
Well, we've got to own our own mistakes on migration. We did make mistakes. You're right to say that. I mean, we didn't have any controls over migration until 2020 because of free movement of people. Then we had 2 years...
We did have control on people coming from outside the EU, and we didn't control that either.
Well, you know the figures. The vast majority of our migration in this country prior to that was people from the European Union. So we didn't really have control. 2022, then we had Ukraine and Hong Kong. But you're right to say that the rules were too lax. The visa requirements were not strict enough. We let far too many people come into this country. We then clamped down on that, which is having the effect. Labour's reversed some of those changes, but we absolutely want to see much, much lower levels of migration than in that report. It is not right that we're going to get 5 million more people in this country through net migration over that 10-year period. That is wrong. We have said that. You get much lower levels of migration under a Conservative government.
OK, can I ask you also about another story in the news today? And this is a new opinion poll carried out since the sentencing last Thursday of the Southport killer Axel Rudiger to a minimum term of 52 years. And that is an increase in support for the death penalty in this country. 55% of Brits now say they would support bring back the death penalty in this country. Of course, it wouldn't have applied to Rudiger. He was 17 when he committed his crimes, and so he wouldn't have been eligible for it either, in the same way he wasn't eligible for a whole life term. Would the Conservative Party, would you support a return to the death penalty?
Well, I understand the feeling. You know, I mean, you can't look at that situation, that horrible, horrendous crime, without thinking along those lines. But I just don't think that's a solution I don't think that's the right thing to be debating right now. People can obviously have their views. I think realistically, you see a clear-cut case like that, it's easier to think in those terms. I think most cases are not as clear-cut as that. We'll spend years debating it. People will spend decades on death row, all that kind of stuff. You see this in the US. It sounds all clear-cut. That's not the way the judicial process works. So I think I'm not in favour of that as a consequence. And but I do think what Kemi Badenoch has said is absolutely right, that there should be whole-of-life sentences if you are 17 in that situation, because there's no way that person should ever come back on
for such a heinous crime. Just funny, you did actually mention the US then. We're talking in the next half hour with a former White House official about Donald Trump and a judge about freezing his plan to sort of massively stopping his plan to freeze federal budgets for, worth tens and tens and tens and tens of billions of dollars for federal agencies, and also an offer to 2 million federal employees. Basically, we'll give you 8 months redundancy. Please take it and leave. And they're hoping to lose up to 10% of the staff. Should we try something like that here?
I don't understand why. You're the employer. You can say to your employees where you're required to work. You don't have to give them 8 months' pay to do that. You can say you're coming into work. I was an employer.
No, this isn't about people working from home. By the way, you guys couldn't get your own staff in Whitehall to work in the office.
Well, we did work on that, and we should do more on that.
But you couldn't get them to work in the office. You need to be in the office every day, or even 4 days a week. They said no, nothing was done about it.
All my private office, when I was a minister, all worked in the office every single day. And that was the reality. We had lots of work to do.
Most of Whitehall doesn't.
But should government become more efficient? My God, it should do. The public sector is 8.5% less efficient than it was in 2019. If you return to those levels of efficiency, that's about 90 billion pounds of savings. You don't need to stick up taxes to pay for those public services. No. You just need to make the government more efficient.
If only you'd been in power for 5 years after that point and could have done something about it. I'm not letting you go. Kevin Holloway, I so appreciate you turning up and coming on the show. I hope you'll come back. But we speak truth. We speak truth on this show. Kevin Holloway, Tory MP, Shadow Housing Secretary there. Quick word from Candice Holdsworth.
Yeah, I think, the Conservatives, even themselves, they know, and they've privately admitted, it's been reported, they know that a lot of the things Labour are doing, they they should have been doing, especially with planning reform.
Absolutely. 11:36 is the time. We're going to squeeze in a couple of your calls, I very much hope, in the next few moments. And then we're going to be talking about a BBC licence fee effectively being paid even if you never watch anything on the BBC and you only watch Netflix or Disney+. Would that be fair? Yet again, the BBC always gets the money, don't they? We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 11:39 now is the time. Let's talk right now about, well, how we fund the BBC. And I know an awful lot of you not helpful about funding the BBC, not keen on it with the licence fee, and often you not paying it. Well, it's a bit of an issue for the BBC. Now there is some talk within government of changing the BBC licence fee to affect rather more people, including people who've never come close to watching the BBC or are watching anything on live stream. They've got Netflix, they've got Disney+, but they'll still be expected to pay the licence fee under plans being considered by ministers. Let's talk about this with Campaign Director at Defund the BBC. That's Rebecca Ryan. Very good morning to you, Rebecca.
Morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Now, can you explain exactly what it is that we believe the government is currently looking at?
Well, they're considering rolling it out so that at the moment, if you watch any live broadcast TV, that's a TV that is broadcast from anywhere in the world. So even if you're watching a TV station from, from the Middle East, if you're watching it in the UK, you have to have a TV license. And the only exception to that is the BBC iPlayer, which is an on-demand platform that has BBC content. So what they're looking at is extending that to therefore being any on-demand content, that you would also need a TV license for that, which is an absolute huge...
Yeah, I mean, basically, the argument has been, look, you're not paying the BBC licence fee just with BBC. People say, well, I don't watch the BBC, I don't listen to BBC Radio, I don't even look at the website. And they say, well, no, if you have a television and you watch any live TV on any channel, you have to pay for the BBC. And then it became any live streaming of anything on your iPad or your computer or your phone. And now it's kind of, yeah, whatever you do, we're going to get you somehow. Do you think this is basically being looked at because they know they are losing an awful lot of money? There are a huge number of people now who, whether legally or not legally, don't pay their licence fee anymore.
Absolutely. And the thing is for them is it's really difficult to police as well at the moment because, as you said, people used to think that if you had a TV that you had to have a TV licence. But actually for quite some time, it's been since we've had on-demand and smart TV, you don't need to have a licence just for having a TV. And so it's completely unpoliceable for them. If they turn up at your house and you say, I don't watch any live broadcast TV, I only watch on-demand, they can't do anything.
And no, you can't come in.
Yes, exactly. They can't unless they can see through your window or whatever and catch you. But this means this, new proposal that they're considering would mean that essentially anything that you're watching on TV, you would need a TV
I mean, basically, this is a tax. My thing has always been that this is a tax. I mean, don't call it a licence fee. It is a tax, and most people are forced to pay it, whether you like it or not. Now, I don't get a say about my taxes that I pay for, various government policies I disapprove of, like all the mad net zero stuff, but I have to pay it anyway. These things aren't technically hypothecated. But the key thing about this is an increasingly unpopular tax. This is a tax that people really resent paying because they're forced to pay for a broadcaster who is no longer a sort of a public national broadcaster with actually doing public service. This is a broadcaster that is basically, I mean, so much of its coverage, its coverage of Brexit was shocking. Its coverage of immigration is dishonest. Its coverage of benefits its coverage of Israel and Gaza has been dishonest so many times again and again. Its coverage on climate change is basically, you may as well get Greta Thunberg to run the whole lot. It's unwatchable an awful lot of the time in terms of its news coverage, which is its basic remit to inform. And I think a lot of people feel very resentful that they're having to pay for something, not only that they don't watch, but they believe is actually, frankly, a lot of the time, misinforming.
Absolutely, and it's dangerous, as you said, the kind of reporting about Brexit, where they started saying that essentially half the country was racist. How divisive was that? How dangerous was that? And that's the thing with the BBC, and that's why over these last sort of 5-10 years, people have been sort of 500,000 a year of households are sort of saying, actually, I don't want to watch this. If it means I can't watch any ITV or Sky Sport, fine, I'll just watch Netflix, I'll just watch Disney Plus or whatever. And now they're going, oh, hang on a minute, we'll just have to bring that into the remit as well. But what it essentially amounts to is a tax on, it's equivalent of taxing people for watching DVDs. This is content they've already bought. It's not live broadcast. It's not what the BBC TV licence was supposed to be.
Exactly. Do you think it's going to happen? I mean, I think fundamentally they're going to take it into as being just sort of a tax that just goes on, part of our income tax. It's just going to be taken away because it's so unpopular. Do you think that's where it's going to end up?
Well, I think the BBC are very squeamish about doing that because then it's a sort of state-funded broadcaster, and
which it is.
Yeah, and they want to have this kind of illusion of it being sort of independent, and so they're looking for other ways to try and to do this. And as I said, they've talked previously about putting the tax on broadband because that's where it actually sits. The more unlimited broadband and faster broadband we get, the more people will move away from live broadcast TV. Yeah. So, who knows where they're going to go.
They'll get us whichever way you look at it. Rebecca Ryan from Defund the BBC, thank you for that. Candice Holdsworth joining me the whole this morning. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, they have to compete. They have to win audiences. I mean, that's how everyone else has to do it.
That's a mad idea.
I know. Revolutionary.
I know.
But it's amazing to me how many people I know now who pretty much just watch YouTube. They just go through YouTube.
Well, I've had them now. I don't do a breakfast show anymore, and I always go through. I listen to Mike, and I listen to watch a bit of Sky, watch a bit of BBC. I try and get a little bit of everything to feel like what's everyone covering. What's Radio 4. I mean, my husband always knows when I'm listening because I'm just shouting all morning. It's like wakes me up. It's just so much of it's nonsense. And I don't care about the lesser spotted vole or whatever it is they spend 15 minutes on every morning. But there we are. Thank you very much indeed for that. Let's squeeze in a call before we get to a break. Nigel's on the line. He's in London. Nigel, you want to talk about this third runway at Heathrow, this mythical third London. It's like a unicorn. We think it might exist, but we just don't know.
Well, I'm told it's something's flying in the sky, but I'm just confused by the whole thing. We need to boost this country, and building a third runway will not only offer the opportunity for tens of thousands of new jobs, but once the runway is completed, not in my lifetime, it will offer tens of thousands of jobs to service the runway. It will boost our economy. And what's interesting about this country is we are so forever closed for business. Now, Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam has 6 runways.
I know. I've been wittering on about this for the last few weeks. 6!
It's mad,
and it's a tiny country, massive population to area ratio, and they've got 6. I wonder why.
Yeah, and 7 airports in the United States have numerous runways, which are Chicago, which has 8 runways. So why is there such negativity and U-turning about this country? Get our sleeves rolled up, get our shoelaces tied up, and let's get to work. Let's
get the spades in the ground.
Absolutely. I just find it remarkable that people like Keir Starmer and, in fact, the previous government are so negative about moving forward and making this country, forgive the phrase, great again.
Yeah, absolutely. And they don't talk about the benefits. Everyone does. Oh, well, someone's not going to like it. There's going to be digging up. Yeah, there's going to. We've had to have building work on our home. It's an absolute pain, and we apologise to all the neighbours, but it was work we need to do, and it's massively improved our home. It's worth it in the end. Our country will be improved by this. The ability for people to export, the links with booming economies in Asia. This is going to bring the future. This is going to bring the growth. If you are opposed to the Heathrow runway, you don't want growth in this country. It is that simple. 11:46 is the time. This is Talk. We'll take a quick break. Then we're going to talk about, well, what is going on in Trump land over in America, because things are going to be booming there because the can-do attitude we're hearing. We're going to be talking about that and why, oh yeah, the judges are getting involved. Up next, this is Talk.
Government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear? Will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this Parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence, and she has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Kenneth Holdsworth still with us. Hoping to speak to former White House official Matthew Bryser in just a few moments, just sorting out some tech on that. But let me tell you what we are going to be talking about with him. Because Donald Trump, part of many, many executive orders that he announced when he's been in office, I mean, we're only like just starting his second week, are we not? But he had basically ordered a freeze on, I've said tens of billions of dollars in federal grants earlier, but actually it's hundreds of billions of dollars in federal grants and loans. It was due to come into effect on Tuesday, and just minutes before that, a US judge decided to temporarily halt it. Put the plan on hold until next Monday. Well, I'm delighted to say Matthew Bryser has joined us. Matthew, thank you for joining us. This freeze from a judge on this, basically this ban, effectively a freeze from a judge on a freeze on all this massive spending on federal agencies. Tell us first of all who the freeze on this expenditure, who that was going to affect, what sort of agencies would it have hit?
Well, that's the big problem, that it's not clear. When the new press secretary, Kathleen Leavitt, gave her first briefing yesterday, she said, read this two-page memo, and what you'll see is that this won't affect anybody who gets direct payments from the federal government for welfare payments, essentially.
So individuals who could face being hit.
Yeah. Individuals, yeah. But then she never clarified, well, what other government agencies are or are not included. She said, I'm not going to go through all that here. So it wasn't clear. And it sounds like every government agency is included in this review.
And this was basically, we're going to have a review. Right now, we're stopping your funding. Now, we know that, under DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, under Elon Musk and other efforts, and some from the executive orders on the first day, we're basically looking at massively cutting down the, apologies, trying not to sneeze. Massively cutting down on the cost of federal government and the overreach of government, and particularly diversity, equity and inclusion and all that stuff. But this was much wider than that, we think.
Oh, yeah, this is every program. Every single U.S. government program is what it sounds like would be reviewed. So except those ones you mentioned, Julia, the direct payments, everything else is under review and all funding must stop. And yeah, people were, whether they're Republican or Democrat, were really worried about this. Like, what about my grandmother used to get Meals on Wheels, right? And so, someone would come and talk to her, give her some food. That's all like immediately stopped. And that's a very popular program on both sides of the political aisle.
Right, yeah. So there could have been personal, individual impact on those people, as opposed to some bureaucrats sitting at home being paid a high wage and not getting anything done. So that was concerned. So the judge has temporarily blocked it. But there is an issue where, fundamentally, this is within the executive's purview, within the separation of powers. Donald Trump has the right to stop federal funding. Federal budget is basically his budget, isn't it? He can do this.
Well, it is, but there is a constitutional question about that. So Democrats are arguing once the Congress disperses the money, appropriates it, and says you need to spend it on these programs, the executive branch must do so. But in my own experience, very often, not because of any sort of undermining of the system, the money wouldn't get spent sometimes because there weren't the proper programs to spend it on, or the time wasn't right.
And there's just huge ways. There's a really big issue in America with what they call pork barrel laws, where basically to get an agreement of this senator or this congressman or woman, they have to agree, OK, we'll do this, we'll give you this money for this project. So and everyone goes, well, he's got that, I want that. And every single thing ends up costing billions and billions and billions and billions more, whether it's on a state level or on a federal level. Everything just costs way more than it does. And I mean, and as we know, people talk about a booming American economy. America is in trillions of debt.
Oh, it is. And a lot of people, both American economists and financiers and global ones, worry how sustainable that is, and that at some point the chickens will come home to roost, and the dollar will lose its status as a global currency. Sanctions aside, by the way, which also hurts the dollar. Yeah, that's a real concern.
Yeah, I mean, the reality check. And again, let's not sugarcoat everything. One thing I did like announced by Donald Trump yesterday, this is an offer of roughly 2 million federal workers, basically buying them out. We're offering what we would call a redundancy package. Basically, we'd like you to leave work now. We'll pay you until September. The redundancy packages like that don't really exist in the States on that sort of level. And basically, they reckon that will save some $100 billion if, as they would expect, 5 to 10% of federal employees basically quit. There's certainly a demand, you have to be in the office, you have to be accountable, you can't be working in diversity, equity and inclusion, you need to be doing something productive, otherwise we don't want you. But isn't there a worry with this that, I mean, I'm all in favour of you getting rid of some federal workers, and I'd love us to do this here. I've worked in offices where they've offered redundancy payments like this, and what we saw was an awful lot of people who are good people who can get another job very quickly in the private sector or elsewhere. They take that. Lovely, I'll get paid for 8 months, thank you very much. They get another job. The people who know they're unemployable anywhere else, they stay. You get stuck with the worst people.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, in my experience, 23 years as a U.S. diplomat, I mean, sure, there were a lot of people who weren't working very hard. And there were a lot of people also who felt that they were the keepers of orthodoxy and various policies. I don't believe in the deep state, but that was just sort of a human thing. I have this job and I want to defend my interests. Yeah. But there are so many public servants that chose to go in the government knowing they could make a lot more money in the private sector because they believed in the mission. And that's what we might lose with these sorts of buyouts.
Yeah, indeed. One other thing I was very, very excited to read and would be a big fan of happening in this country to a greater extent, a broad executive order signed by Donald Trump targeting transition-related medical care for children. It's an order titled, it just says it what it is, Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation, and basically restricts access to what's called gender-affirming medical care, telling a very, very vulnerable, unhappy boy or girl that, yes, they're actually born in the wrong body. It includes puberty blockers, hormone therapy and surgery. Anyone younger than 19 they'll be able to get federal funding for any care. So if any medical school or hospital or any other organisation carrying this out will not get any federal funding. Now, most of them rely on federal funding, don't they, for this? Is this effectively a ban on this surgery now?
Well, unless it's challenged and overturned in court.
Which it will be. It'll be challenged.
It'll be challenged, yeah. But so what Trump has done is shift the whole terms of the debate in America on so many issues, and this one in particular. 6 months ago, if you would step up and speak like this, you were labeled sort of an extremist, on rightist, Republican.
Transphobic, yeah.
They're taking another look and say, wait a second. Maybe children do need to mature a little bit. I mean, the human brain isn't fully developed in terms of cognitive capabilities until college years.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we don't think you can vote or drive a car, but we absolutely think you can cut off your genitals or your breasts. And I mean, it's mad. It's evil.
Yeah, and we protect our children in so many other ways through the law, right? So, as you're suggesting, take another look. So Trump is catalyzing new perspectives and new debates. I think that's healthy. Just the way he goes about it, like with this ban on the aid programs, is so disruptive that it's causing a lot of.
Maybe he is a disruptor. That's what he said he was going to do. Maybe that's what's needed to shake everyone out of the. I mean, I would say the madness we've seen. Great to talk to you, Matthew Brassler. Thank you so much for joining us, former White House official. Candace Holsworth, just on any or all of that, what's your reaction?
Yes, I mean, the thing is, this is America's sort of setting the tone, and everyone's quite envious. I mean, there's just optimism and decisiveness and setting a culture of excellence.
But of course, judges responding.
Yes,
I mean, again, there's going to be issues in there. But, Meals on Wheels don't turn up. Okay, that's an issue.
Yeah.
There are. He often does a bit of a sledgehammer when perhaps you could have just gone a little bit more carefully. But maybe we need a little bit of a. Well, okay, prove that you are needed.
Yes.
Prove that people depend on your agency. If they don't, if you're just someone painting zebra crossings with rainbow colours, then maybe we don't need you.
I mean, in times of crisis, I think a lot of things can seem possible. People are ready to reject old paradigms and they sort of embrace disruption more. But like you said, government, you often find people who are very resistant to that.
Yeah, but then also when you talk of the trans thing, an order protecting children from chemical and surgical mutilation. That's what it is.
Yes.
Who's not in favour of that?
I mean, really.
They call it gender-affirming care. It's literally chemical and surgical mutilation of children.
Oh my goodness.
Call it what it is.
Yes.
Let's use the right terminology, and then perhaps people go, oh, no, I'm not in favour of that. Well, funny that. Maybe it shouldn't be allowed then anymore. Yes. Candace Holsworth, thank you very much. We're going to get to a break, going to take latest headlines. We're going to be talking to the chairman of Reform UK, Zia Youssef. Wonder what he thinks of that, and take more of your calls as well. This is Talk.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you and welcome back to the show. I am Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. And whether you are listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, as always, it is really great to have you join us. With you live all the way until 1 o'clock. Coming up in this hour, more on growth. Big speech from the Chancellor of Rachel Reeves. Quite a lot of questions and answers as well at the event in Oxfordshire. Not attended by Ed Miliband, interestingly, the Energy Secretary, as she announced the government is in favour of building a third runway at Heathrow Airport. I will believe it when I see it. They've been discussing this, every government in and out, since before I was born, for goodness sake. Bearing in mind that the current Prime Minister, right now, doing PMQs, actually voted against Heathrow expansion only a few years ago, because he said climate change issues were more important. Oh, how things have changed now you're in government, eh? We'll talk about more of that. I'd love to get your thoughts on as well. Rachel Reeves particularly, so Heathrow expansion, unveiling more policies for growth, she says, including creating Europe's Silicon Valley, greater transport links, housing links. Oh, yes, more charging points for electric vehicles. That's the key one, Rachel, from accounts. That's the key one. I want to know, will any of this actually deliver growth? Do you believe it? I particularly want to hear from you. If you are someone who is delivering growth right now, whether you have a business that you employ 100,000 people or you employ 2 people, you are creating growth, you are creating jobs, you are paying taxes, you're contributing to the wealth of this country. What do you think would actually contribute growth? Give us a call. Tell us why what she's doing will. Tell us why it won't. 0344 499 1000 is the number. You can text the word TALK in your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1. Standard network rate message. We're also going to be talking more about those incredible immigration figures, that projection from the Office for National Statistics yesterday, pushing the UK's population above that of France for the first time in a generation. They're predicting an extra 5 million people in the country by from 2022 to 2032. Those projections of the ONS have always been way out, massive underestimates. So how bad do you think it will be? And what is the impact from that? And what are the solutions to that? Because we're told, we need more younger people to cope with all these people who are pensioners. But maybe we should make it easier for people to have, those baby things that will grow into adults and earn money and pay tax. Just a thought. Plus, okay, as I mentioned, PMQs is on again. The usual rules apply. Peter Cobble, I'm delighted to say, is back in action. He's watching it, so you don't have to. And he's going to bring us the highlights, if there are any, a little bit later. Delighted to say also that Candice Holdsworth is still with me. She's a writer and commentator. It's so lovely to have you in the studio. It's been such a long time. Yes. So much we're talking about. Lots of really interesting calls. I'm going to do my best to get to a bunch of calls in about 15-20 minutes' time. First up, though, let's talk to our next guest, Chairman of Reform UK, and that is Zia Yusuf. Thank you so much for joining us, Zia.
Thanks for having me.
I've just outlined some of the measures that we've heard from Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, about growth and delivering growth. Lots of words like action and sustainable and getting on with actual serious things, actual house building and airport runways and all of this. Are you encouraged that we actually are going to see growth in this country over the next few years?
We will see none. I think that you summed it up well. It's all buzzwords. It's all talk, and clearly this is a cabinet. There's really nobody in that Labour cabinet, certainly who's ever started a real business. Almost nobody has had a real serious job, or they've had to think about systems at a bigger scale in the private sector. None of them have ever had those jobs. So they always think that government needs to be the entity that drives everything. And unfortunately, what this Labour government are doing in their actions is inhibiting growth in a pretty catastrophic way. If you actually just look at what Rachel Reeves has done since Labour have come to office, what have they done? They've raised national insurance on employers by 2%. They've talked down the economy in a really catastrophic way, constantly talking about black holes and some such. They have also increased capital gains tax. If you want to improve investment in the United Kingdom and get people investing more in businesses, don't raise capital gains tax might be a good idea. They've also made it much more risky, Julia, for small businesses, small and medium-sized businesses to hire people. With the whole, obviously, Orwellian term for the bill is workers' rights. What it's done is make small and medium-sized businesses who can't afford big legal fees. I speak to a lot of them. They are now cutting a lot of their vacancies. And this is actually the really bad thing when you have socialists in government, even if it's well intended.
Well, but this is the interesting thing.
Even if it is, it has the opposite effect of that intention.
There's been so much talk about what Donald Trump is doing in the States. You know, why is the American economy doing so well, and why we should be looking to America. Again, even talking about Europe's Silicon Valley in the Oxford-Cambridge corridor with these two world-class universities and all the great brains and minds and ideas that are happening there, and pushing that. But the crucial thing is, we have a can-do attitude in America. We actually, in America, they actually sort of celebrate success and growth and competition. You have a very, very free, unregulated labour market, which means the hiring and firing, unfortunately, actually means there can often be more jobs as a result. But also, crucially, they've got very low energy costs compared to us, which makes it easier to sort of, set up these companies and to actually fund them. On all of those counts, that makes America a much more amenable country to growth. On the specific issue of the third runway at Heathrow, the Prime Minister, currently taking questions at PMQs from Kemi Badenoch, he only a few years ago voted proudly against Heathrow expansion. We know the London Mayor Sadiq Khan is still opposed to Heathrow expansion. He says it's because of noise, air pollution. He's obsessed with air pollution, but also he says the hugely damaging impact on our environment. Do you actually think that the Heathrow third runway will ever actually be built, given that they've been talking about it since before I was born?
No, I personally don't, and it's going to be one of those things that drags on and on. But you said something really important there, Julia, which was the energy costs. One of the most important reasons why I have no confidence at all that we will ever get real growth in this country under a Labour government, and frankly why we had precious little / none under the Tory government, is because we have the most expensive energy costs in the world. And the reason we do that is because of these insane obsessions with net zero, this religious cult of climate alarmism, which has meant that what we are doing is unilaterally disarming on a global scale. We are obsessed with renewables. It means our base load capacity is far too low. We then have to, ironically, having not drilled in the North Sea, not using our own gas reserves, we're importing gas.
Yeah, don't. It's genuinely painful when it's laid out like that, Zia.
But it's really important. You can't, that isn't a tinkering at the edges and an announcement here and a task force there. That is fundamental to the ideology and doctrine of what we call the Uni Party. Obviously, it was Theresa May who enshrined these laws. It was the Tories, of course, who introduced the net zero minister. We shouldn't forget that. So all Labour are doing, what Mad Ed Miliband is doing, is taking what the Tories had already started and accelerating it. So that's a really fundamental point. And, in terms of New Silicon Valley, as someone who built a technology company, look, the United States and China are now pulling away at such a rapid rate. OpenAI, who make ChatGPT, they are paying their engineers on average $900,000. Do you know what when the head of cybersecurity in the UK, that job is currently less than a six-figure job. That's where it's being advertised. So our brightest and best, we still do produce incredibly bright people in the STEM fields from our amazing universities, 4 of the top 20 universities in the world in the STEM fields in this country. But unfortunately, they are fleeing for greener pastures. They are heading to the United States. Now, we think we can get them back, and that's what Reform are going to do.
Okay, so how would you get them back?
Well, you'd unwind almost everything we've been talking about in this conversation. Exactly what Donald Trump did. Whenever people say, reform, they don't understand, it's going to be really hard. President Donald Trump came to power with a very, very clear set of policies that he promised the American people. And within 24 hours, for example, he enshrined, you were just talking about trans issues, he enshrined biological sex into law within 24 hours.
Amazing that someone had to do that.
And the Tories had 14 years and they never got that done, right? So there is a lot that you can do. Similarly, he's withdrawn from the Paris Climate Accord. He's scrapping all of the net zero madness. Obviously, the US already has much lower energy than we do. We need to massively cut the size of the bureaucratic state and probably cut the civil service by more than half by the time we get into office, given how fast it's growing and improvements in technology. That means we can cut people's taxes. We need to make it much easier for small and medium-sized businesses, A, to form, and then B, to grow. So we're going to reduce the we're going to raise the threshold, at which point things like corporation tax and IFRS, all of these things that are incredibly difficult for small and medium-sized business owners, we're going to scrap all of that stuff, get all of the red tape out of the way, and that's how you allow the British economy to grow again.
Let's talk about what's been going on in America then, because Donald Trump has just had a judge. We keep seeing this in the UK, haven't we? We saw this over trying to deal with, deporting people to Rwanda and pretty much everything else that the last Tory government was saying they were attempting to do, where we've got a judge who is basically put on hold for at least a week Donald Trump's freezing of the hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayers' money spent on lots of federal agencies. No one's quite sure which agents would be impacted, what the direct impact would be. Do you think that either any government for any hue, but particularly if there were a reform government next time around, could take a leaf out of Donald Trump's book on that front?
Well, absolutely. I mean, when we win the next general election...
When you say?
Not just... Yeah, well, look, if you look at where we're headed in the polls, Julia, we've got an enormous amount to do, clearly. We have an enormous amount to do. But we can see the trend and direction in this country is that British people are waking up. They're waking up and appreciating the optimistic message that Nigel and our MPs are offering them. And that's why we've gone from 14% support in the general election just 7 months ago to polling average of the polls at 25%. So, yes, we have an enormous amount to do. We don't take anything for granted, but we are confident that this great country can be the dynamic and prosperous country we know that it should be. Now, in terms of your question about how some of what Trump's executive orders, some of those are being challenged in the courts. Well, of course, every country has certain frameworks and checks and balances. I will say that the founding fathers in the United States were very particular about putting the purse strings. That's the challenge that the Doge, as amazing as Elon is, the Doge's biggest challenge, for example, is that Congress largely in the United States controls the purse strings. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, so long as, big condition here, so long as there are majority of reform MPs, and this is what we are working on, 350 to 400 reform MPs who have been elected, who are in no uncertain terms about why they've been elected, not sort of three different religions in one like the Tories constantly trying to remove the leader, complete opposite. If we have that, then we are very confident we will be able to bring to this country a transformative agenda and get that done very quickly.
Well, it'll be very interesting to see where it to happen. Can I ask you also about immigration? There's extraordinary stats we saw from the Office for National Statistics, which are probably extraordinary, that they're once again massively underestimating the level of net migration to this country in future years, as they have done with pretty much every projection they've given, suggesting that between 2022 and 2032, which is in just 7 years' time, we're going to see an extra 5 million people in this country. That's, 4 or 5 Birminghams, depending on what we think Birmingham's population is. Who knows how much higher it is in reality than the official stats from the census last time round say. But those projections from the ONS have been wrong every year, by a massive factor. Some people are saying we're looking at actually by the middle of next decade we're going to have a population of 80 million people. If Reform were in power, what would you do about that?
Well, we'd stop it. None of that, none of what you just described would happen or will happen when Nigel's the Prime Minister. So the first thing on the ONS, you're spot on about how awful they are projections. But it's not just projections. They're awful even with the historical reports. Remember, it was the ONS who revised up the net migration figure to 1 million last year, and that was a revision to the tune of about 20%. So such is the decay now in this country. We have no idea about 200,000 people coming to the country legally, literally going through those passport turnstiles. So there's a lot of work to do there. So the first thing we're going to do is freeze net migration. So no... the population growth from immigration will be zero for a number of years, not forever, but for a number of years. We have to do that. If we don't do that, the problem is only going to get exponentially worse. The second thing we need to do is stop the boat. So we're going to immediately leave the European Convention of Human Rights, replace it with a British Bill of Rights. We will ask His Majesty's Royal Navy to conduct a humanitarian mission. And I speak to senior people in the Navy who say, listen, we can stop these boats extremely quickly, ridiculously quickly. All we need is the political clarity. We need political clarity and politicians who are going to back us. They will go in, they'll ensure nobody's harmed. They will take the boats that are coming back to France. We will ensure anyone who comes here illegally are deported. I mean, even deportations. People have no idea when you ask them, for example, how many people do you think President Obama deported during his 2 terms as president?
Yeah, it was very similar numbers.
It was 3 million people. Yeah. 3 million people, 1.6 million in his first. And you can go online and you can go on YouTube and watch videos where he's actually talking in the White House about how important this was and how it was not a left or a right thing. It's just the right thing to do. If people come here illegally, it's not fair on the people who are doing it the right way, and it causes, frankly, social decay. It really is.
I think most people would say the issue is actually the fact that these people got in the first place. I mean, we've got very little excuse for that on the basis that we're an island nation.
We're an island nation that spends £54 billion a year on defence and still has a formidable navy. That's why the boat's coming. 37,000 last year. It's going to be similar numbers again this year. It's just about the political will. What we need is decisive political leadership. We need a British Bill of Rights that puts the rights of British people ahead of those of foreign citizens, which means that the sovereignty of our House of Commons, of our Parliament, will no longer be undermined by totally unaccountable judges abroad.
OK. Great to talk to you, Zia Youssef, Chairman of Reform UK. Thank you for that. Listening to all that alongside me, Candice Holdsworth, who's writer and commentator, joining us throughout the show. Lots of confidence there. When we win the next election, all this. We know that some of these key issues, like growth, like the ability, this over-bureaucratised public sector, the immigration numbers, unaccountable judges. These are a lot of the issues that brought the Tory party down. I know, because I can see the messages coming in. An awful lot of our audience will go, yep, to everything he's saying. Is there a catch?
I think the key concept is political will. And I think, we've been talking about this for so long. People were saying, oh, well, we can't go against the ECHR and, how are we going to get this through legally?
No. Clutch their pearls.
You are elected. That is what you are there to do.
You're allowed to change the law. Otherwise, what's the point of having MPs?
Absolutely. And I know that, someone like Keir Starmer as well, he's got to decide where he is. Is he a politician or a lawyer? You know, because I think he has very lawyerly instincts. But no, you're a statesman now, and you have to be confident. And I think they realise that they were just so miserable, and now that they have to start being optimistic, and people respond to that.
But isn't it interesting that you've come into office and you've deliberately gone for the miserable thing and think, that won't have an impact? But doesn't that just show how much that Labour did not and does not understand how to keep the economy going, the role of the state in the background to enable people who are wealth creators to get on and do it. But there is still this fundamental thing, I think, at the heart of it. And I think it's not just in backbench Labour MPs and members, and it's many in the front bench as well who've never run a business, never been brave enough to get out on the road and back themselves and create that wealth themselves. That they're not even being like high flying in the public sector. These people, I mean, they're an awful lot of non-entities. But they fundamentally think that business people are bad.
Oh, I think so.
Workers good, business people bad. Like that, and that is not the relationship most people have with their employer. That is just not where it is.
No, I don't think you would raise a tax like employers' national insurance.
If you had any understanding.
Yes, if you didn't have a good understanding of what it is to run a business.
Any
business,
any comprehension at all of what it was like.
But like I say, just having a cafe, just running a business, like being able to employ people, and I've said it 3 times now, but make payroll at the end of every month.
I can serve this many extra cappuccinos or bacon sandwiches, but I need an extra member of staff. But how much is that member of staff going to cost me versus how much money am I going to get in from the extra sales? This is basic. I say apprentice. Day one, first week, challenge. I don't think that most of the Labour front bench would pass that challenge. I really don't. I'm just saying, PMQ is still ongoing. Keir Starmer has been answering questions. Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, she has been challenging him over the government's employment rights bill. She says it's anti-growth. So basically she says, well, shouldn't you oppose it? You say you're in favour of growth above everything else. Shouldn't you oppose this? He has refused to say that. But he says he will not take lectures from the Conservative Party over what is best for business. We're going to get some clips. We're going to get some analysis from Peter Carball about what has been going on in the next 20 minutes or so. Up next, going to take a break, and then we're going to take more of your calls on growth. Is what Rachel Reeves announcing, whether it's about the there's Europe's Silicon Valley between Oxford and Cambridge, or whether it's about Heathrow's third runway. Will it ever be built? Will that actually deliver growth? Tell us why you think it will. Tell us why you think it won't. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
the economy going to grow? Exactly.
So if you look at trade finance plays a fundamental role in financing and enabling trade. Very, very important.
Trade with who?
Suffocating in...
Well, trade with who?
Sorry?
Trade with who?
The rest of the world.
So you want? So who's going to create the products that you're going to sell to the rest of the world?
We've got thousands of good companies all up and down the country who trade every day of the week.
Right.
That could be trading more. Terrific brands.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. Good afternoon, I apologise. 12:24 is the time. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Candice Holdsworth still with us. Let's go straight to your phone calls now. 0344 499 1000 about growth and Rachel Reeves' big speech. Les is on the line. He's in Surrey. Les, you particularly want to comment on the prospect of a Heathrow third runway.
Yes, I was brought up in the Heathrow area, and when I worked at Heathrow, there were 3 runways, now reduced to 2.
Were there? I didn't know that.
6 runways, with plans for 9. And now we look at Paris Charles de Gaulle, 4 runways, Madrid, 4 runways, Amsterdam with 6 main ones and a further one making 7.
Yeah.
Any one of those 3 airports, Paris, Madrid, Amsterdam, has got more runways than Gatwick, Stansted and Heathrow put together.
Yeah, that tells you everything. And this one of the key things, and I remember talking to the boss of Heathrow, we did a lot during lockdown, we were trying to get like airlines, people back up and running and trying to explain, and he was so good at explaining it, like, why on earth does the airports being open make such a difference to the economy, but not just tourism, but also having loads of runways and having a massive international hub airport where a lot of the people and even that arrive never actually step foot out of the airport, why that does have a massive impact on the economy. And it's about those trade links. It's about what also goes in the planes. It's the cargo that you often carry as well, isn't it? It's the exports.
And Heathrow is the busiest of all of those.
Yeah.
And we have all these meetings. The politicians are mainly lawyers, and lawyers use taxpayers' money to their advantage. Yeah. And these things go on and on. Nothing ever happens, whether it's immigration, airports, roads, whatever. Nothing ever happens in their period of office. It's always left to the next one to pick up the pieces.
Why do you think that is? Because, I mean, you're a retired pilot, right? You worked at the airline. The airline industry is a very dynamic industry. We know, like, if there's an accident, it's like, right, we get the black box, we want to find out exactly what happened, we need to prevent it happening next time. It's an industry that sort of lives on its wits almost day by day. You need to know why things work and why they don't work to keep people alive, to keep the airline running. Why do you think that governments, particularly pretty much every government in recent decades in this country, have failed on that front?
Most MPs are lawyers, and lawyers are on this great big gravy train, whether they succeed or whether they fail. And what they don't realise is customers make paydays possible. And if you're killing business like the way that they're killing this country, we have nothing to offer.
Yeah, I'm wondering how much it comes down to. Again, a lot of people in jobs, whether it's even like trade union, lots of them, Labour, a lot from trade unions, and you say a lot of lawyers. I'm wondering how much of it's like their livelihoods have depended on
being that controls our government, above our government, that pulls the strings, and they
do you.
And they answer to them because they're not for the British people.
They're not for the British, that's true. But I just wonder if they're so much about their jobs, and I think this is really where Keir Starmer's coming from. It's all about words. It's all about, like, that's why they're obsessed with hurty words on social media as well. But everything's about words. You just say something and then it happens. Or you say something, you persuade a jury, or you write something. But they're not very good at getting stuff to actual practical doing stuff, our politicians.
No taste in nothing, and that's all they offer us. Nothing.
Les is not a happy man with his government. Les, thank you. I appreciate your call. Ray is on the line. He's in Colchester. Hello, Ray.
Yes, hi there. Well, another wonderful announcement from Rachel Reeves, building for growth after the disaster that is her budget, which basically has frightened all businesses. They are either laying off people, planning to lay off people, and basically they're heading towards a recession with absolute certainty now. What to do? Because just like a rabbit caught in the lights, the Labour Party are looking around wondering, oh, what can we announce? What can we do?
Yeah, so something they were massively opposed to only a few years ago, probably even a few months ago. Oh, no, now this looks like a good plan. It's almost like reality has hit them very hard.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned reality because, of course, at the same time as they're now, we're going to expand and we're going to have, this big Heathrow Airport expansion. At the same time, we're aiming for net zero. I pauperising everybody in this country. And I'm afraid the maniacs that are running this country now, with the net zero, which gives us the most expensive electricity in the world, and basically is guaranteeing the end of manufacturing in this country, when we are an economic wasteland with poverty sweeping across the land, they will stand on top of it, look across, and they will see success.
Yeah, no, they will. That's the terrifying thing. Well, also, as long as you employ some more civil servants and some more quangos, then everyone's fine. And they will go off into their quangocrat jobs in the future, as all these former politicians have done, and lots of Tories as well, and they'll say, job well done. It's terrifying, isn't it? Thank you so much for your call, Ray. Andrew's texted or tweeted in a message saying, I'm asking, will Rachel Reeves, what she's announcing today, will it deliver growth? And he said, yeah. Growth of NHS waiting lists, growth of unemployment, growth of national debt, growth of inward migration, growth of illegal migration, growth of our thoughts being called hate crimes. The list goes on. James says, crippling small businesses, hiking the cost of living, penalising pensioners and shouting about plans that may never see the light of day. This is just another pathetic move from Reeves. Jeff says high energy costs and high taxes equals low growth. As an economist, you should see that, Rachel. Yeah, Rachel from accounts, you should know that. I mean, maybe you should complain to the complaints department at Halifax Bank of Scotland. Apparently, Rachel knows someone who used to work there. Vicky says the only growth they know is in their own pockets. Ed says, I don't think this is Ed Miliband. I think it might be another Ed. Ed says, of course, they will deliver growth in immigration, debt, poverty, energy prices, unemployment, immigration of wealth creators, crime and NHS waiting lists. Bit of a theme coming there. Let's go to Anthony, who is in Surrey and wants to have his say. Hello, Anthony.
Oh, yes, good afternoon. Well, I'm looking at Heathrow from my rooftop perch here in Ashford in Surrey.
Very nice.
And finally, we've sort of laid Boris Johnson, as you said much earlier, to rest this idea we're going to close this down and turn it into a garden city, which was always the most ridiculous thing on the planet. And talking about garden cities, a lot of these ideas are very old. They go back to the Cameron years, don't they? I could see
before
George
then.
Standing. Yes, that's right, Blair, when he had this conversion, another convert to Thatcherism.
Yeah.
The problem with Rachel Reeves is she doesn't join up the dots, as a lot of people said. This is just a kind of, well, what we need is a Mary Berry who actually bakes something. What she's presented today is just a list of ingredients. But the problem with Rachel is she just doesn't seem to have a clue how to even make a sponge cake.
That is such a great analogy. I think that's such a great analogy. Yeah. She just doesn't know how to put it together. Really good point. Anthony, thank you very much indeed for that. Candice Holsworth.
People are sceptical, and rightly so. They realise there are huge gaps in Labour's worldview, the way they see things, where they see growth coming from. Fundamentally, does that align with reality, and will it actually deliver it? And I think people are absolutely right to be asking questions. Yeah, and it's so good.
Yeah, what is your experience? What is your track record in this?
Yes,
and again, also, now you're massively in favour of Heathrow expansion, but you were opposed to it before.
No.
What's changed?
I know. Well, I mean, they're in trouble and they know it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the battles that go on with that, the legal battles. I mean, that is one thing I would really like them to just sweep away. But again, it is a huge project. It's not just tarmacking a little bit of extra land. I mean, it is moving the M25, a major motorway. I always rather like Boris Island. Yeah. That was one of the plans. But I can imagine also an awful lot of our audience not living in the south. Oh, by the way, most of the country not just living around London, obsessed with London. saying, well, what about us? Yeah, more expansion, more investment, you know, around Oxford and Cambridge, around London. What about us? You remember those, you know, those railway links between the east and the west of the north of this country and the Midlands? I mean, you know, it's always the north that ends up losing out in the Midlands. Anyway, at 12:33 is the time. We're going to take a quick break, and then there's plenty more to talk about. PMQs is still ongoing. We're going to have Peter Cardwell in the studio very soon to tell us what the highlights were, if there were any. Up next, we're going to talk about those latest population statistics. They're feeding into pretty much every story. We're going to talk to Jamie Jenkins about just how significant they are for our economy. And frankly, an awful lot of people haven't got to grips with quite how bad they are. That's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. 12:35 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Candice Holdsworth's joining me. Candice, we've been talking an awful lot about these population statistics. They've come up with a lot of our political guests.
Yes.
And of course, a massive big impact when it comes to, you know, growth. Session with growth today. Rachel Reeves' big speech. And of course, we also discussed it PMQs as well, which we're going to talk about with Peter Cardwell in a few moments. But the immigration stats, these are projections from the Office for National Statistics yesterday. Big obsession everyone has had with them is it's all about, you know, the number of net migrants to the country, prediction of an extra 5 million by 2032. But actually, it's going to be way more than that. But also the crucial thing, and we discussed this very early on, if people are still tuning in since 10, one of the key things was that you know, actually the problem is we don't make enough babies here ourselves. If we really want to deal with our issues in this country, we need to be having more babies. You've done your bit. You've got 3.
Well, the thing is as well, there's been so much negligence. You know, I think people are starting to decouple the idea of massive immigration with growth. They're realising, no, actually, it can mean lower living standards, especially when you're not building houses. You haven't got more schools. You haven't got more hospitals.
You have to live somewhere.
You know, there's all that you have to take into account. I think there was just this constant narrative where if you questioned it in any way, well, are you against economic growth? But now I think that we can actually see the results, and no, it isn't. The two are not necessarily linked.
But we're constantly told we've got an ageing population, but fundamentally we don't do anything to help younger people.
Well, yes.
Set up a family, buy a home. and start having children that they want to have.
Well, that takes a fundamental system overhaul and reboot. But are we able to do that? You need people who can diagnose that problem correctly.
Yeah, I don't think they can, but there we are. Let's talk to someone who's definitely diagnosed an awful lot of the problem. He's a former ONS statistician, and that is Jamie Jenkins, and joins us right now. Good afternoon to you, Jamie.
Good afternoon, Julia. How are you doing?
Very well indeed. You're always fantastic on these sort of stats, pulling them apart and looking at the significance. And just talk first of all, we've got the massive issue of the huge number more people who are going to come and live in this country, according to these projections. By the way, legally, so I mean, if we don't want them, surely the government could stop that from happening. But the government is obsessed, Labour and Tories, obsessed for years with the idea that you need to import people to do jobs. Somehow growth is delivered by having more people in the country. But prediction of an extra 5 million people from 22 to 32, only 7 years away, and 6 million increase by 2040, realistically. But it could even be more than that. What impact does that have on us?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things here, Julia. So on the net migration figures, basically all of the growth. So I think a lot of the headlines were focusing on 2022 to 2032 yesterday. But if you can just take the 2024 numbers out of 2040, you're right, a 6 million increase. But actually, all of that increase and a little bit more is net migration, because over the next 15 or 16 years, we'll see kind of a decline in the population through natural replacement. Pretty much what that means is we're going to have fewer births than deaths. So if there was no migration between now and 2040, the population would go down. And some people might think, well, that's a good thing, because we've seen massive migration over the last 30 years. But I think there's two key parts to this, which we might want to unpick. It's the impact on the younger part of the population of migration, and then there's the older part. So if you consider the topic you've just been discussing there, Julia, in terms of we're not having enough children. Now, what you need is 2.1 children to be born per couple to replace the population. And the fertility rate is running at around 1.4. And we haven't seen that 2.1 since the 1970s. But if you just look
and
at
we don't see that, by the way, in pretty much every Western nation now.
Not true. And if you look at some of the economic facts and figures underneath that, so in 1997, the average house price compared to your salary was 3.4.
Yeah.
Now in 2023, it's 8 times. So younger people now are delaying or cannot afford to actually buy a house. So if they're not having a house when they're younger, they might move in together a bit later, which means they don't have time to have those 2.1 children.
Yeah.
And the reason house prices has gone up so much in the last like 25, 30 years is because of the mass immigration that we've had in the past.
We have more people and pretty much the same amount of housing. We've not built anything like the same amount of housing we need. But this thing, I know so many couples in their 20s and 30s who say, I mean, not people who are still living with their parents, a lot of couples saying, you know, we're renting, we're paying an extortionate rent, we've got massive student debt, we're trying to save for a big deposit, the house prices keep going up and up every time we get close, but we don't want to start a family until we're economically secure. But at this moment, they're looking at, when am I going to be economically secure? But the economic security of the nation relies on those young people, particularly. It doesn't hurt if there are people in work having children. Rather, those kids tend to be rather more net contributors over the years than the children of people on benefits. I mean, that's the reality. That we need those couples. We need those couples to be having children.
No, definitely. And what the problem you have is, Julia, then people will call that we need more migration because we're not having younger people being born. And then that exacerbates the problem because of the house building issue. And the second problem with the figures that you'd see, Julia, is the older people. So if we go back to the 1991, there were 4 million people aged 75 and over. Now, in 2024, that's around 6.5 million. So we've seen a 50% increase since the 90s. Now, if we go up to 2040, projected to have 9 million people 75 and over. So there's the pension issue. But more importantly, we've discussed this a few weeks ago, Julia. The NHS is in crisis now. But if we can have 37% increase in the population 75 and over, and we know that older people put the demand on the NHS, are the government planning to build 37% more hospitals, 37% more NHS?
Oh, I know the answer to that. No. Yeah, I mean, that's because we don't do any planning or any of these things. But that is so crucial. It's not just the cost of pensions. It's not just the taxpayer ratio to people who are living on. And lots of people think their pensions are being paid for by the national insurance contributions when they were 23. They're not. That went on day-to-day spending all those years ago. But you see the extra cost, this is huge cost. Social care, NHS care, all of that is got to be paid for somehow, and there have to be the beds and the staff to do that work.
No, and we've seen the number of beds in the NHS fall over the last 30 years, when it technically should have been rising with the stats that we've just been talking about.
But wasn't that down to keyhole surgery? A lot of treatment didn't involve. There was a routine thing. I mean, come on, when people used to have babies, used to stay in hospital for two weeks. I left after about 5 hours.
Yeah, there is an element that care's moved on, that you don't need to treat as many in hospital. But Mark Drakeford, the former First Minister in Wales, Julia, where I live, was saying a couple of weeks ago that Wales has too many hospitals. And try telling that to people when you've literally got ambulances stuck outside, can't get people into the beds. People are dying because ambulances don't turn up.
Yeah.
So the wake-up call, I think these numbers today, Julia, are saying the migration numbers might be in or out by a few, million, for example. But we know people living today will continue to grow older. The government needs to wake up, act, and start building the hospitals and the infrastructure today.
Yeah.
Or in 2040, when the likes of you and I, Julia, are getting more towards those older ages, we'll be struggling to get the services. And West Streeting can do this now, but they won't do nothing now, Julie, because they work on 5-year election cycles. They don't care about 2040, and they need to sort it out.
No one does. Well, that's why social care reform has been kicked into the long grass yet again, and it has done by every... I can't just attack this government. Every government in the last 20, 30 years has done exactly the same. And what's so frustrating about all of this is this stuff is blatant. It's been sitting there for everyone to look at for years and years and years. And what's fascinating, until I think 3 or 4 years ago, most of our political elite were going on media, were going on about overpopulation, isn't it awful because of climate, etc., etc. When anyone paying attention for the last decade or two has gone, the real problem in the West is that people aren't having enough babies. And if you want to look at low growth right now, imagine what it's going to be like when we've only got pretty much a matching number of people in the working and paying tax with the number of people who are living 20, 30, even possibly 40 years in their pension years and needing healthcare. The numbers will not add up. We are entering dire circumstances, and I don't think any of our frontline politicians are paying attention. Do you, Jamie?
No, I pretty much you bang on there, Julia. And I think that the stark statistic you've talked about there is kind of why they want to increase the state pension age, is because we can't afford to pay for the state pension age.
Yeah, but again, raising it a couple of years doesn't touch the sides of that.
And it doesn't touch the side because it's not like a private pension where you've paid in. And remember, the government has a huge bill on the kind of the public sector pensions that need massive reform as well in terms of that. So you bang on. Politicians have not planned. The numbers are the numbers. They're there for everybody to see. Yeah. It's just pure political incompetence.
Absolutely. We talk about that a lot on the show. Jamie Jenkins, former Office for National Statistics statistician, he knows what he's talking about. Thank you for that. Just final word to Candice Holbrook. So the solution to a lot of this is be open and thinking, but also making it possible for young people to have the children they want to have. A horrible, horrible stat I was told by a guest on the show about 6 months ago. 50% of women at the age of 30 who don't have a baby will never have a baby.
I know.
But 90% of women want to have a baby.
Yes.
That's awful. That's not just damaging to our economy. That is heartbreaking.
I know. And having children, it gives you a stake in the future. It makes you feel optimistic about the future.
It's the greatest thing on earth.
It's this long-term thing that you put so much into, but you get so much out of it.
It's the basis of society, of our wealth, of security. It's most people's happiness. Most people would say their children are the thing that makes them most happy in this world. So why are we having policies that kind of deliberately push people away from doing the thing that would help everybody and them? It's madness. Yeah. Candice, I have to say goodbye to you right now. Peter Carball is coming. Such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Doris. Come in again very, very soon. 12:46 is the time. We're going to find out what happened at PMQs up next with Peter Carball. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
It's obviously a very horrid situation for everybody. There is some disquiet, is there not, at the very least, about the way that the authorities have handled all of this.
At the moment, I think people here are just in that panicked fight or flight mode. It really is. You're in the lap of the gods. Everybody's on edge. Nobody feels safe.
As you know, where I live is on fire right now. Literally, the entire city of the Pacific Palisades is burning.
Any message from you to Governor Newsom or Karen Bass tonight?
Spend less on hair gel. What can I say to them? Not big admirer of either.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 12:49 is the time. I'm delighted to say Peter Cardwell is back.
Hello.
From your sick bed. I know
Yes.
you've been back on air already. You've been a little poorly thing with your man flu, haven't you?
I have. It's
Lots
been
of drama, racing to A&E.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I got very good NHS care, it must be said, and they looked after me very, very well, both the GPs and at the hospital.
We're
But I'm
very-
alive and well.
We're very, very glad to have you back. We have missed you. Right. Have we missed anything good at PMQs?
Not really.
Okay.
This was not a particularly
We'll just go to a break
vintage
early.
game.
No, I always say, don't I? I say, please go and watch it so we don't have to. Yes. And if there are any highlights, we'll bring them to you later. And the first thing. So not set the world light. It is amazing how often, and we saw this actually, I'm sure you were watching it, Kemi Badenoch last week, her questions all about the education bill, which is a very important bill, but not about all the topics that everyone else was
the issues
talking
of the
about.
day. Yeah, exactly. Well, today, in fairness, she did talk about the issues of the day and the fact that Rachel Reeves gave this big speech this morning in Oxford.
Oh, did she?
About growth.
We've not mentioned it on the show. We should have covered that, producers.
We'll get growth. Growth will be happening. It'll all be marvellous and wonderful, apparently. And that's what Kemi Badenoch asked about in her first question. In fact, all of her questions were about growth and this particular bill, saying that that she believes that it's actually anti-worker, anti-businesses and small businesses in particular. But in the first clip anyway, Keir Starmer had a response I think people will remember.
Was it scripted? I wonder. Let's have a watch and a listen.
Part 1 of the bill means a new employee could start a job in the morning and take their employer to a tribunal that afternoon. It is no wonder that this bill has been called an adventure playground for lawyers. This bill is terrible for business, but it is great employment for lawyers. I know the Prime Minister loves the legal profession, but he needs to stop being a lawyer and start being a leader. This is another measure in the bill that fails his growth test. Will he show some leadership and drop it?
Mr. Speaker, I understand she likes straight talking. She's talking absolute nonsense. She knows, and anybody who understands anything about the bill or any employment law will know you can't start in the morning and go to the tribunal in the afternoon. Now, Mr. Speaker, we know she's not a lawyer. She's clearly not a leader. If she keeps on like this, she is going to be the next lettuce.
Oh, I was expecting a better gag than that.
It wasn't great, was it?
She's going to be the next lettuce, ooh, you know. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the thing is, you know, I mean, no one thinks he's a very good leader. That's part of the issue. But I mean, certainly the feedback we've had on the show today, so many people, we've got the outline of what was announced by Rachel Reeves. A lot of it trailed anyway.
Yes.
But no one really believes a word of it because everything they're saying is in direct contrast, in particularly to that national insurance rise, 25 billion's worth, but also the labour laws that are coming up, and I think that's what the next clip's
It
about.
is, and also the fact that there could be more tax rises coming in the spring, and that's something a lot of people are worried about, but particularly the power of the unions. And it was really interesting. I think this is going to be played again and again when Kemi Badenoch talked about the increase of the power of the unions, and what happened. A big cheer from the Labour benches. We'll see this.
Oh, let's watch and listen to that.
Part 4, they haven't read it, Part 4 of the unemployment bill is the biggest expansion of trade union powers for a generation. Exactly. Thank you. The public will have heard them cheer. Rather than deregulating for business who create growth, he's deregulating for the unions. Yeah. Clause 61 alone reduces the notice period for strikes to just 1 week. Given strikes are catastrophic for growth, will he drop Part 4 of the bill?
Mr. Speaker, it's good for working people and it's good for the economy. And she should keep up. The CBI have welcomed our positive steps this morning. Their quotes. The Chancellor's just given a brilliant speech on the economy, fixing the mess they left and growing our economy. CBI said they celebrate their positive leadership, a clear vision to kickstart our economy. That's the difference. We're growing the economy. They left it in a complete mess.
I mean, it's true. The economy was an economic mess, although we had Kevin Hollinrake, Shadow Housing Secretary, on the show a bit earlier, who was very keen to try and defend Tories' record. I'm not sure many voters are going to be too much in agreement. But it is absolutely fascinating, these contrasting, the talk and the action from Labour on growth. We're going to do this, going to do this. We had a fantastic call just a few moments ago, and a caller said, the thing is, you've got Rachel, she's got the ingredients for the cake. Yes. She just doesn't know how to cook. We need a Mary Berry. She doesn't actually know how to make even a Victoria sponge. They don't know how to do it because none of these people have any background in business, and they don't seem to know anyone who's ever run a business, unless, I don't know, it's someone who's giving them a load of money as a donor. But they don't seem to understand some of the basics, like that when you're running a business, you're going to be worried about the marginal cost of hiring the next employee, and therefore putting up national insurance for the employer and putting up and lowering the point at which they
keep those people. Can you afford to keep especially if you're doing an outlay of about £2,000 extra after the budget to bring in a new person. And
also, as can be mentioned in those questions, about also this employment law. And again, I understand we want to protect workers. Workers need to be protected from. I don't want someone being sacked for not done anything wrong and and a bad employer. But fundamentally, people need to be able to hire and fire much more freely. Otherwise, they simply will not hire anybody.
Well, that's not going to happen now because this bill that's coming in is going to make it harder to get rid of people. And there is a marked contrast, I think, as well in America. You look at what Donald Trump is doing, sweeping away a lot of regulation, making it easier to hire and fire, making it easier for businesses, and the fact that their economy is going back gangbusters. And, our friend who came back from New York recently said it cost £18 for a Big Mac meal in McDonald's. This is how expensive America has got because its economy is doing very, very well, and that is just not the case here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, last time I went to New York, I was just like, are you kidding me? How much everything costs. Interestingly, near the end of Prime Minister's questions, Tory MP Andrew Rossendale, who was actually on the show recently, he brought up the ONS figures about UK population rising. Now, again, you'd think that would be really good, solid Tory territory if it wasn't for the fact, of course, that Tories had been in power until last July. We've just been speaking about that with Jamie Jenkins. And he asked who voted for it. Because, of course, we've been told again and again by every single party, we're going to bring down immigration, and then no one does. And Keir Starmer replied, I think he should talk to his leader because net migration went through the roof under the last government. Now, this thing, there are so many things that Kemi Badenoch wants to bring up, but she can't do it very well because Tories were just as bad.
She is certainly hamstrung by that, and the immigration point is a very, very pertinent one. It was the very last question of PMQ's, and Andy Rossendale brought that up, and certainly any key points and any strong points that he was making in that will actually very easy for Keir Starmer just to bat it away and say, what about the last 14 years?
Although we're going to be in the same territory. We remember Cameron and Osborne did this, didn't they, in the 2010.
But they had a plan. You may not agree with their plan, but
well, actually, again, they got re-elected because actually everyone said, everyone's against austerity. Well, apart from the fact they got a majority in 2015. But crucially, they were up against Ed Miliband. Small point worth making. But also they spent a lot of time saying, well, thanks to the last Labour government. And people very quickly went, we know that.
Yeah,
we
what
know,
you got.
But what if, and I wonder how long that's going to fly for the Labour Party.
We will see, and certainly it's something they're going to rely on for some time, but really there is, how are you going to fix this? What's your plan?
Yeah,
Tell
absolutely,
us.
absolutely.
And I'm not sure this morning where, very interestingly, Ed Miliband not at that speech this morning.
No, very busy. He's busy with meetings.
Not at PMQs
He's
either.
busy with meetings. He's probably busy chipping away at his little Edstone, isn't he? Remember that?
That was Torsten Bell who came up with that. He's now Treasury Minister.
Can I say, this is the thing that blows my mind, is that in 2015, Ed Miliband could have been Prime Minister of this country. Get that through your heads. Wow!
Could be Jeremy Corbyn in 17 and 19.
I know, but we forget about the Ed Miliband thing. Anyway, I'm delighted to just say that young Mr. Ian Collins has joined us in the studio.
Could have been Michael Foot at one point as well, if we want to play that game. Who's this fella sitting next to you?
Well, apparently he's back from the dead.
Is it the Cardwell has returned?
I have returned.
We're very sympathetic in this office. We send
really
him nice
are, yes.
messages
This is how we roll here, yeah.
But, you know, man flu.
Cardwell's back. Fantastic. Apparently, 7 months, 3 weeks, 4 days and an hour is how long you have to blame the previous administration.
Is that when? And then
I just worked it out.
I thought you were talking about like marriage, like how long women can remember the last row. I don't know. I thought that's where you were going.
That goes on much longer than that.
3 a.m. on this date, you said.
1987. We are. It's funny, Edmund, about the stone, the Ed Stone thing. I mean, that was just crazy stuff.
Remember that?
Never mentioned green things back then, did he? He suddenly became this sort of evangelist of all things. And now one assumes he has to resign, of course. Spoiler alert, he won't.
He threatened to resign under